anything out here, you check it in first. Kind of volunteer work. Other than that, Connor, I'll let you introduce the rest of us.
Thanks, Bobby. Good morning, everyone. My name is Connor Murnane. I'm the district forester here in the Conroe district. I work for Texas A&M Forest Service. I've worked for Texas A&M Forest Service for about 5 years now. I got a degree, Bachelor of Science in Forestry from Stephen F. Austin State in Nacogdoches. I worked up in Minnesota for a little bit after that, and it got way too cold up there. I came back home as quickly as possible. Yeah, so I work here in the office. I work with Jaden. You all met Jaden in your class. Jaden's been with us for a couple months now. He and I haven't worked. I'm out of the office during the week these days, so we haven't worked directly one-on-one yet, but I'm looking forward to that. So what we do, essentially what my job title is, we cover Montgomery, Harris, and Waller counties, and we help rural forest landowners manage their property, manage their trees, SIG tree calls, or if you're familiar with agricultural evaluations, people can apply for a timber evaluation if you own 10 acres or more of property in East Texas, and significantly reduce your property taxes on that property. So that's a little bit of what we do. We also manage this place, the W.G. Jones State Forest, where you're at today. If you can't tell, it's a little bit of a mess around here lately. They are remodeling our office currently. So everybody is working in this room. So that's why we have tables everywhere. But I've been talking about this remodel for like 4 years now, and it finally just started like last month. So we're looking forward to that. So please pardon the mess everywhere that you see with you today. Regarding our icebreaker, does anybody want to share a favorite moment they had with a tree? Sure. What's your name?
My name is Ruth.
Okay, Ruth.
I grew up on Long Island.
Okay.
And my dad bought an apple tree. And little by little, he grafted different species of apples.
Okay, awesome.
So I think he had
8 different species.
until the start. But the bad thing was, you know, that this was a million years ago. He treated it with DDT.
Oh. Well, I'm sure it's still legal.
Well, it's gone now. But, when we found out what it was but yeah, he had all the different types of apples. I don't. Such a great time.
Yeah. Grafting is very cool. I'm not sure if anybody's tried grafting before. It is quite an art. Really. So, I did a longleaf pine on a loblolly. It lasted about 2 months out in the nursery. But it's cool, right? It's cool being able to do that with trees and kind of cross those species. Quick note, I'm very informal, so if you all have questions throughout this, please feel free to raise your hand. I'd rather we address them now than you and I forget what the question is and that goes unanswered. So today's topic this morning, you're stuck with me for about 2 hours or so regarding forest ecology. And then our agency biologist, Miss Donna Work, is going to come in after that and talk with you all about what she does, as well as our cool little endangered species, our claim to fame here on the forest. So we'll get into this talking about forest ecology. Can I get a volunteer to read the definition of forest ecology for me? Sure, go ahead.
What the heck? The study of the forest as a biological community with the interrelationships between the various trees and other organisms constituting the community, and with the interrelationships between these organisms and the physical environment in which they exist.
It's been 8 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday. We're saying words like interrelationships.
Don't forget the time we had to wake up.
That's right. Yeah. Goodness. Yeah. It's a little early to be saying words and phrases like this. Huh? So what does that mean? What's plain English? What does that mean to you all?
The forest and everything in it.
Right. Yeah. So forest, ecology is a study of all things, right, in the environment. Forest ecology in particular is a study of how trees interact with those things in their environment, how they interact with different tree species with one another, as well as wildlife, and as well as how they adapt to human impacts and disturbances within their environment, right? One more volunteer for me. You can read what forestry is. Go ahead.
Science, art, and practice of creating, managing, using, and conserving forests in a sustainable manner meet the desirables needs of the
That's the definition of forestry as according to the Society of American Foresters, kind of the professional association of foresters here in North America. But if you weren't familiar with what forestry is, there's your big lengthy definition for it.
Broad.
Very broad, right? Yeah, broadness is a good thing, right? Because landowners and those people that own trees or those public entities that have land that they manage trees on have different goals and different objectives, right? So we want to keep a broad definition of this, right? We don't want to stick forestry in one certain lane and have it stuck in there, right? So some forest landowners, they do it for commercial income. They want to harvest their trees and get some sort of income so they can send junior to college or grandson to college. Other folks do it for wildlife and hunting opportunities. Other folks do it for aesthetics, recreational opportunities on their property. So, but just because we put this broad definition on forestry, that doesn't mean we can't do certain other things, right? If we're managing for commercial income of timber, it's also going to benefit the wildlife. It works hand in hand, these certain practices that we do when we talk about managing trees and managing forests for forestry. So it kind of works hand in hand together and how we manage it. Talked a little bit about the agency. I'm not going to bore you to death with all this, but the agency was started, Texas A&M Forest Service was started and founded in 1915. We've been around a little bit over 100 years now. We are a system member, a system agency of the Texas A&M University system. For all you Aggies in the room, there you go. A majority of us did not go to Texas A&M. Majority of us go to Stephen F. Austin or somewhere else, but that's okay. So a couple of things that the agency does, of course, we direct all matters pertaining to forestry within the state of Texas. We also serve as the lead response agency for wildfire suppression in the state. So anytime that there's large wildfires out in West Texas, or if you were around in Texas in 2011 or so, we'll talk about that later on in the presentation today. But Texas A&M Forest Service serves as the lead agency for wildfire response. If you've been here on this forest before, you may see I have like 8 bulldozers out here, but those are our primary suppression tools to suppress wildfires in Texas. Believe it or not, it's not all hand tools and going out in the woods and knocking things. That would be miserable to do and very ineffective. So bulldozers are the best tool we have here in Texas and our primary response tool that we use. So in cooperation with local fire departments and things like that, when fires get too large for them to handle, that's when they call us and we'll come in with bulldozers, airplanes, helicopters, and crews, things like that. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything ever preventative before wildfire? I mean, is there any kind of FireWise program or something?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So a big part of our goal is fire mitigation and fire prevention. So that includes things like grant opportunities or cost share funding for landowners, for local communities, local neighborhoods, subdivisions and things to be able to manage the fuels. We talk about fuels, it's like understory brush, those things that can light and burn really easily. So we provide cost share funding and grant opportunities for those folks to reduce that amount of vegetation on their property to help prevent that. We also support things like community wildfire protection plans. So in the event something does happen, where are we going to evacuate all these people to? Who's going to respond to this? Who's going to serve as lead agencies? Where is the emergency operations center at? Lots of things like this that are important to have in place before some sort of disaster like this happens. Okay, a couple of quick facts for you. If you weren't aware, there are 62 million acres of forest and woodlands here within the state of Texas. And this is a combination of Louisiana and Mississippi combined. So this is all of Texas, right? All of Texas, so including East Texas, as well as, the forests of Central and West Texas. 62 million acres of forested land within the state. Pretty impressive number, right? Of that 62 million acres, 12 million of that sits here in East Texas. So for us, we define East Texas as 43 different counties. Generally, you can say anything east of 45. We've missed 45 by a mile or so.
Is that
But
state and national forest then too?
sorry.
Is that state?
Yes, ma'am. That
national
accounts
forest,
for state, national forests, and private, as well as commercial land too. So that accounts for all land ownerships. And we'll break that down and how that looks regarding ownership here in a second. This is the second largest in total forest land in the United States. Anybody want to take a guess at who's number one? Right? Yeah. Alaska, the biggest state, has by far the largest amount. This is an impressive fact here at the bottom. So these forests in Texas, particularly East Texas, accounts for 23% of all woodlands in the southeastern United States. So starting here in East Texas, all the way up the East Coast of the Virginias, Texas accounts for 23% of that total forested land in the southern United States. So who owns this land? Who owns these forests in Texas? If you've been here for a while, if you were born here, you're well familiar that Texas has very little public land, right? Texas, we are very big on our private land ownership and private property rights, right? So 69% of those forested lands here in the state is held by private individuals. We call these NIPF, non-industrial private forest landowners, NIPF, non-industrial private forest landowners. 23% is held in industry and investment. This is your traditional, if you ever hear of old paper companies had their own, forested land back in the day. So that practice has pretty much gone away. Paper companies don't really own their own land anymore. It's held by real estate investment trusts or timber or investment management organizations, right? So these things that trade on the stock market, right? And your retirement fund is vested in trees, believe it or not, sometimes. So. And of course, the rest of that amount accounts for public land. So this accounts for national forests, state parks, state forests, things like that, city parks. Very small percentage of that land is public here in the state. Yes, ma'am.
I was out, I don't know what Yankee, but I was up capturing bees somewhere up on East Texas, and that is where there's loads and loads of small pine trees, and that's owned by
IKEA. Yeah. So IKEA has very recently made a very large investment, about 3 million acres or so, I want to say. Yeah. IKEA owns a large investment of that.
So as a source for their.
Yes, as a source for their production. Yeah, so keeping in mind, right, when we go back to the definition of forestry, talking about the proper management of trees, whatever they use for their production, they replant, right? And the cycle continues. It's just like growing a crop, right? It's a form of agriculture. Unfortunately for us, traditional agriculture, it takes one season for crops to grow. For us, it takes about 30 or 35 years to get pine trees. So our rotation cycles are a little bit longer than traditional farming, but it is a form of agriculture when you really think about it. Does anybody notice the trees over here next to the parking lot planted in nice, neat rows?
Yeah.
The trees do that naturally. Right? So just like crops, right? Those were artificially planted. We purchased the seedlings. Those were planted in the mid 80s when those trees were planted. This loblolly pine, probably the most popular pine tree species in East Texas. Those were planted in the mid 80s or so, and they're in a nice, neat row, just like you would find, corn or other species. But we'll talk more about why they're planted in rows like that. That's called a pine plantation, very commercial pine setting, commercial forest management setting. We'll talk more about the benefits of that here later on today. But that's just kind of some things you can pick. You'll see it. If you ever go like deep East Texas or you're driving around East Texas somewhere, you can kind of pick it out and see who's really managing it. What has changed in these forests in recent history, recent past? Since 1935, East Texas has gained almost 2 million acres of forest. So this is conversion of pasture to forest land mainly. Most of that property lies in Northeast Texas. So about 270,000 acres of forest being converted from pasture land to timberland. So people give up on, cows are expensive, right? And grass is annoying to grow. So people tend to give up on cows, and trees are much less picky and less expensive than cows are. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any estimates on how much of that land is like turning back into forest that was originally forest before pasture land?
That's a good question. I'm not sure though. I'm sure it's a decent amount, right? Assuming East Texas is like dominated by forested land, and early settlers in East Texas probably converted that to pasture. I would say it's a fair amount of that is going back to forested land. Okay, as for us down here in Southeast Texas, no surprise, we've lost around 159,000, and this is kind of out of date. I'm sure this is well above what this number says here, but no surprise, this comes from urban development. So areas like Montgomery County, Harris County, the Beaumont area too, as well, things like that are just blowing up in urban development. So here's some numbers. This is from 2021, but another thing that we do is kind of an economic impact study of all counties in East Texas is what, what does the forest sector provide as far as economics to East Texas? A couple of numbers here. Montgomery County isn't known for the timber, right? We're kind of in the concrete jungle these days. We're not known for trees or growing trees, but believe it or not, in the heyday of East Texas, Montgomery County was the #1 wood producing county in East Texas. All of the woodlands was old forested land, right? So things like Grogan's Mill, what do you think that comes from, right? An old sawmill, right? So things like that, a majority of this, and even a decade ago, 1488 was a 2-lane road, and if you were coming out here, you were kind of going out to the sticks, right? Very much not the case anymore. So what kind of forests do we have in Texas? Have y'all gone over ecoregions yet?
Yes.
Have we done that? Okay, so y'all should be familiar with this map. These are some of the, this is a kind of a broad generalization of those forests. There's a lot more here, but I kind of broke these down into 5 different categories. Of course, the piney woods you'll be familiar with. This is where we are today. We're kind of on the western fringes. You could call it the western piney woods here in Montgomery County. You can drive 30 minutes west and you'll be in the Post Oak Savannah, right? You'll be out in the College Station area. So you can immediately see that transition from piney woods over to Post Oak Savannah as you're driving along. Live oak juniper, the cross timbers, and my particular favorite ecoregion of Texas is the mountain forest. Has anybody been out to West Texas, like Fort Davis, Alpine areas, Guadalupe National Park, these areas like that? Those are kind of some of my favorite areas in the state. Ponderosa pine, believe it or not, grows in Texas and grows out there. That's your infamous, Colorado, Montana, smells like Colorado species, right? Ponderosa pine grows in Texas, and there's aspen out there too. So we talk about East Texas. I'm not going to go into all 5 of these different categories I just showed you all, but we're here in the piney woods, and we'll talk about the forests of piney woods, right? So it's important to distinguish between East Texas upland forest and East Texas bottomland forest. Very 2 different site characteristics, and with that, you're going to get a multitude of different species that come with that. So our dominant species here is going to be the southern yellow pines, we call them. The southern yellow pines of the United States is going to be your longleaf, shortleaf, loblolly, and slash. The commercial king, the most popular of those, is loblolly, grows the fastest, grows straightest, fewest branches, things like that. Makes for a good tree to turn into paper, dimensional lumber, 2x4s, things that you build your house with. The other ones, longleaf, you'll find that a little bit. We're just outside the native range of longleaf here, but if you go a little bit deeper East Texas, kind of Jasper, Newton counties area, you'll see longleaf. And longleaf is, there's one right behind the office right here that we planted a decade ago. Super easy to pick out. It looks like a ponytail coming off of those branches, right? Pine cones significant in size. And then, of course, shortleaf, we're very, very unique with our naming system here. Shortleaf, very, very short needles on those, as well as the cone size is going to be minuscule, very, very, very tiny, very tiny. Slash was planted a lot. It is really susceptible to a lot of root diseases, though, anosis root rot and butt rot, things like that. It was planted a lot in the 80s and 90s, but that's kind of gone away. So your dominant majority species that you see here around this area is going to be loblolly pine. This forest that you're on today, the Jones Forest, I would say probably 75% of the trees, or the pine trees, is going to be loblolly pine. You'll find intermixings of shortleaf and slash throughout the forest. A little bit of longleaf here and there.
But is slash also native?
Yes, it is. Those 4 pine species are the native southern yellow pines. So you'll find those species from here all the way up to the East Coast to the Virginias and things like that. Some of the oak species, y'all are, I'm sure, familiar with these oak species here. Black hickory, very, very valuable hardwood species, very slow growing, decades to grow. Elms, sweet gums, kind of the trash tree of the forest. Not much. It grows everywhere you don't want it to grow. If you're not familiar with sweet gum, it's that one that drops the spiky balls in your yard. Your lawnmower may catch it and shoot it off in your yard. Sassafras. This one's pretty easy. You'll typically find it like on the forest floor somewhere. You can crush the leaves. It smells like Fruit Loops sometimes. Shrub species, Yopon. Here in our area, southeast Texas, if you look down at the forest floor, it hasn't been managed, it's Yopon, and it is 20-foot tall wall of
Endangered
Yopon.
species.
So Yopon is a nuisance for us in forest management here in southeast Texas. If you go up to northeast Texas, it's pretty much non-existent. It's kind of unique. You can casually walk through the woods as one would and one would enjoy, as opposed to here in southeast Texas. I mean, you can look across the street, you can look around here areas of the forest. This is when I'm trying to manage here in the forest, this is the species I'm trying to manage. When I do like prescribed burning, when we're doing mulching, things like that, I'm trying to reduce the amount of Yopon, because what Yopon does, it is a native species, it's not invasive, so it's native here to Texas, but it's very prolific growing, and it outcompetes the pine tree seedlings. So when those pine tree seedlings fall to the ground, they need sunlight, right? They're shade intolerant. And Yopon does density of Yopon overcrowding, creates too much shade on the forest floor, and those seedlings can't grow. That is the main species I'm targeting when I'm doing any sorts of forest management out here. That picture is from Boykin Springs area, kind of Lufkin area. If you're familiar with that, that's our kind of picturesque pine savanna that we'd like to create. So if I could have the forest looking like that, I'd be a happy person. Some of the forest does look like this, and it requires a lot of management. If you've gone across the street over here on this side of the forest as you first walk in, and a lot of that is because of our special woodpecker friend. I don't see this picture, but Donna would talk to you about it. A lot of that is due, in fact, because we are managing for that woodpecker species, and it does require for that. But we're also trying to return the forest back to what it looked like in the past, right? This is kind of what East Texas really looked like in the past. East Texas bottomland forest. Who's been up to like Caddo Lake area, things like that? This is what I think of. This picture is what I think of when I think of East Texas bottomland forest. So once you get into the bottomlands, I mean, this goes in fact, like if you're going down to the bottom creeks or sloughs or things like that in East Texas, your pine coverage, your pine species will be almost non-existent down here. Again, they like to be growing in kind of the upland soils areas, but kind of those iconic species that you'll find up here, your bald cypress, your water tupelo, things like that are kind of some of those species that are really common species that you'll find up here.
Can I ask you a really stupid Yankee question?
Sure.
Why can't we grow, like, I guess it's the soil and the weather conditions, but like Christmas trees and stuff like in the Carolinas and stuff like that? Is it our soil or is it just the weather gets too hot?
There are commercial Christmas tree farms in Texas, but they don't grow our pines. They grow Virginia pines and things like that. Yeah, but there's a large organization of Christmas tree. Yeah, there's a large organization of Christmas tree farmers.
Is there?
There's like 6 of them.
There was on the student airline.
Yep.
The Willis.
And there's one out by like Old Town Meadow too.
So unfortunately, our native species don't account too much for a Christmas tree, but
Is it the soil or is it?
it's just the characteristics of the trees I've grown here. Yeah. And you'll find typically more like balsam firs and spruce trees and things like that that make that kind of iconic Christmas tree form. Yeah, ours look like Charlie Brown Christmas tree. So I talked about the mountain forests of West Texas, kind of my particular favorite area. So I'm going to force y'all to watch this video because I like it. But this is a really cool thing that we're doing. This is out in the Fort Davis area. If you've ever been out to like the McDonald Observatory out there. So the Nature Conservancy of Texas owns a large tract of land out there, out near Fort Davis. And they do have ponderosa pine prevalent throughout that property that they own, as well as the rest of the mountain range out there. But what we noticed through climate change as well as wildfire impacts out there in that area, that the population of ponderosa pine has really declined and suffered in that area. So a big goal of ours lately has been harvesting the cones of trees that are present out there and then growing those seedlings in our nurseries and then going back out to those sites and replanting ponderosa pine after we grow them. big challenges out here in this area of Texas. It's very rocky, of course, right? So a lot of mountains, a lot of rocks. It's not like East Texas where you can stick a shovel straight to the ground. You're using a dibble bar and you're breaking rocks away to put, as well as the gophers. Gophers are a big problem out here. I went out here 3 years ago to work on this project, and we were trying all sorts of things. We were putting these tree roots in cages. We were sticking, rat poison down in the bottom. We were putting cones around them, all sorts of different things, but the gophers will come up and just pluck those trees out. So hoping I can get this to work for y'all. We'll see if it works. Stand by.
Video. Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Everyone in the last row, stand up and move your seats probably about push back to these.
A little bit more space. We good? Oh yeah, sorry about that. I put it up a little.
When you walk into a ponderosa pine forest at the Davis Mountains, it has a different feeling from everything else around it. You just feel that the place you're in is special, and we want to make sure that future generations have a chance to experience that same feeling and see that special part of the Davis Mountains. The ponderosa pines have really suffered from the recent droughts, and we've been losing a lot of the trees out there, and that's where working with the Texas Forest Service has been really helpful in helping us understand and manage the ponderosa pine ecosystem.
Frankly, it broke my heart to see, what was going on out there. It was just hundreds, if not thousands of acres of dead ponderosa pine. So I knew after that first visit, we had to do something. In Texas, it's found in two very small populations. One is in the higher elevations of the Guadalupe National Park, and the other is here in the Davis Mountains, the island in the sky. It's under siege. It's being threatened. It's weather changes in the weather patterns that we've seen over the last 20 or so years, coupled with wildfires and bark beetle attacks, have really placed the species in Texas in peril.
Well, what we're doing to try to counteract the effects of fire bleeds over into several different other problems that we're treating at the same time that we're trying to get a handle on. And the main thing is to reduce down the density of the forest that is competing with the ponderosa pine.
Well, I think a big role of our agency is providing technical assistance, being able to do the right thing at the right time in the right way. And this was not any different. We were thrilled when the Conservancy came to us and said, will you help us with this project?
Texas Forest Service has been a really great organization to work with because we share a lot of the same goals. The Nature Conservancy wants to protect the entire ecosystem out at the Davis Mountains, and the Texas Forest Service has really been helping us focus on the ponderosa pine woodlands.
We couldn't have done this without each other. Texas is big, and this project was not an exception. People with common objectives can come together in a collaborative way to make sure things get done, again, the way they need to get done.
This is something that, you know, we can all work toward and develop a better way of managing these stands in the future.
It's important really because it's part of our heritage as Texans.
If we lose the ponderosa pines out at the Davis Mountains, the place will be different. It won't be the Davis Mountains that we know and love right now.
It's taken a very bad situation and finding the tools, what we need to make sure that this stand of very important pine trees extend into the future.
This is sort of the last stand. We've got to try to do some things to protect and conserve the species for the future, or it's literally going to go away. It's going away before our eyes right now.
Familiar with this concept or idea of stewardship? What does that mean? What does stewardship mean to somebody? If anybody wants to volunteer.
Taking care.
Taking care of? Taking care. But I like to think of it, you know, as taking care of the land, of course, but then crossing those boundaries between a governmental agency such as ourselves and a private agency such as the Nature Conservancy, or working with private landowners or back and forth, wherever that goes, to reach some sort of overall goal, regardless of what, you know, if you're an average homeowner that owns, you know, 4 trees in your backyard, or if you're the Nature Conservancy that owns thousands of acres in West Texas. There's this overarching goal that you can reach together, working together to kind of reach that goal, and kind of cutting the red tape, or not putting so much red tape or barriers up, and being able to kind of cross those boundaries between government, private, things like that.
Like cooperation.
Cooperation. Perfect word.
Has there been any pine beetle infestation out there?
Yes. They suffer from, if you've ever been out to Colorado, mountain pine beetle, things like that. I mean, you'll drive around Colorado and see mountainsides of just dead standing timber. Presents a huge threat to wildfires. That's why Colorado's had such devastating wildfires in recent history, just because there's so much dead standing timber on those mountains.
So it's a different type of beetle.
Different type of beetle. We have a southern pine beetle as well as 2 other species. But Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, those places suffer from a mountain pine beetle.
That is in West Texas. It's not out of control. It's not part of the problem.
It is contributing to some things, not as much as I would say as climate change and wildfire impacts are.
And the drought.
And the drought, yeah. So, you know, longer, hotter, drier summers coupled with shorter, fewer wet seasons. Let me get our screen share back up for this. Succession, disturbance, and recovery. So we talk about succession. Succession is the replacement of one plant community in an area with another of a different plant composition over time. There's 2 different types of succession that occur, primary and secondary. So succession, whenever some sort of disturbance happens, you know, there's going to be some sort of plant community that comes up, follows it immediately after that. If I burn the forest back here and burn down all the yopon, which I'm trying to do, And then 2 weeks later, you start seeing grass start growing up below that. We're talking about succession there. We're talking about primarily secondary succession. Primary succession is where plant communities established where there haven't been plant communities before. And this occurs over hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we talk about, we're talking about prehistoric like glacier movements and things like that that were occurring. Things that shifted the landscape monumentally is where primary succession is occurring. Secondary succession occurs where some disturbance has happened and some plant community is going to follow up behind that almost immediately within days, within hours. And you and I, the average person, we encounter this form of secondary succession almost every single day of our lives. We drive up 45, we see forests cut down and destroyed for subdivisions. There's some sort of plant community coming in behind that. Some sort of hurricane, weather impact, tornado happens here. There's another plant community coming in behind that to repopulate that. So here's kind of a cool picture to show you the differences between primary and secondary. So you'll see the top there, the primary succession, those pioneer species, and this is over hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, this is occurring, where plant species have never occurred before, start slowly as they move from pioneer, intermediate, into your climax species, growing into those new areas. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't Iceland seeing some primary succession right now?
I would say so, yeah, those areas kind of northern hemisphere, top kind of northern portions of the northern hemisphere would see things like primary succession. Particularly Iceland, Iceland has a lot of like volcanic activity and things like that occur. You'll see things like that. Secondary succession. So for this example, we have some sort of wildfire that's occurred, and then you start seeing our pioneer species start coming in, followed by intermediate and our climax community at the end there. So much shorter time frame on that. I mean, your climax species takes at least 150 years to get to, but still much shorter than hundreds of years. Yes, ma'am.
In Montana, in 2003, we saw a huge fire at Lake McDonald in Glacier Park. It was a Roberts fire, and it pretty much wiped out a whole area of growth. And about 5 years later, the lodgepole pine was starting to come up, and now you can't even tell there was a fire there.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I mentioned the 2011 fire season we had in Texas. If you've been out to the Bastrop, Austin area, you probably noticed that. Bastrop is a very unique area. I'll talk about it later on, but it's essentially East Texas in the middle of Central Texas, right? And due to glacier movements, that's why it's called the hidden pines of Texas, right? The whole area. It really is a population of East Texas, right out there in Central Texas, where pine trees shouldn't be occurring, they are occurring. But you can still see dead standing timber out there, dead standing trees from those fires. And what do you see below it? You see dense, thick forests of pine trees below it. We're talking about, and a lot of that, and I'll show you another video that I like, I'm going to force you to watch later on. But there's been a lot of that stewardship programming, things like working with the local communities, working with the county governments, things like that, about coming in, replanting after this. But that's artificial success. That's artificial regeneration we talked about. But there's also things like natural regeneration. Mother Nature drops pine cones, and those seeds spread every single day. So there's a difference between natural and artificial regeneration. What are some similarities that we see between primary and secondary? Same kind of basic concept of succession, right? So we start with our pioneer species, moving into intermediate, and then our climax community at the end. So it tends to follow the same basic flow. The timelines are much, much different, right? And primary, of course, is where plants have never been before. Stage of succession here, we have some sort of disturbance that occurs. Stage 2 of the succession phase is where your pioneer species start coming in. These are the trees, the plants and things. These things require full sunlight. They are shade intolerant. So this is where you see a lot of your grasses and poor other competitors. But this is important that provides forage and nesting habitat for a lot of your smaller animal species as well. So this is a very critical stage of succession, the kind of your first stage moving into the other stages of it. As we move into the stage 3, this is where you start seeing a lot of your larger trees start coming in. This is where your pine trees are going to start coming in, those other shade intolerant trees. And then finally, as we move into our climax community, this is where you start seeing your shade tolerant trees. So this is going to be a lot of your hardwood species are shade tolerant species. So this is where they start out competing those pine trees this pine trees start going away, and then you have reached the climax stage. So oak and hickory are very shade tolerant. They'll do just fine with a lot of shade on them. They'll grow just fine. Pine trees very shade intolerant. They need full sunlight to grow. Interesting concept of gap phase succession. Once we start seeing things like, and it is sometimes recommended in commercial forest management, doing what we call harvest gaps or clear cut gaps, where you take 2-3 acres at a time and just clear out the whole thing. It's good for wildlife species, but then you also have a different plant community within inside that larger pine forest, right? But this happens on a small scale. A tree falls over in the forest that once took up a large amount of room. Now you have gap phase succession. So what sunlight is now reaching the forest floor. What do you think you're going to get? You're going to get Yopon, and you're going to get a sweet gum right there.
Is Yopon climax?
I would say no. It can be. It'd probably be on the borderline there. So disturbances can either move our stage of succession to a previous stage, or they can advance it and rapidly advance it to a later stage of succession. So here's an example of a couple disturbances, particularly in our area. Of course, we're prone to hurricanes down here in this area, as well as the majority of the southeastern United States. But we also have things like ice. I don't know if we recall that miserable ice storm we had a couple years ago. We also have things like insects. We have 3 different species of pine beetle that we have to worry about, as well as the other different insects and things that go after hardwood trees. Urban development, we talked about urban development in Southeast Texas. So you can see here just a multitude of different disturbances that can occur within a forest, within a community, that can either prolong the stages of succession or move it back or advance it, depending on what that looks like. This picture on the left there, the top left picture, it's going to be some sort of wind event, strong winds blowing down trees, a tornado, things like that. Bottom right is going to be some harvesting operation where we're cutting down trees. An example of disturbance. So I start a prescribed burn here on the forest. I kind of told you all why I'm doing that, right? What effect will this disturbance have on succession? Will that move it to a later or an earlier stage of succession? Right? Because I'm trying, so when I'm doing this, I want to maintain the pine forest ecosystem here. And I don't want those climax species, oak, hickory, hardwood, things like that, which I don't want them because our woodpecker friend doesn't like them. Again, a broad definition of forestry, right? Different goals, different objectives I'm managing for this bird. This bird doesn't like, this bird requires very old and living pine trees. So I need to reduce the amount of hardwood competition within these forests to allow for habitat for that species, right? So when I'm doing a prescribed burn, I'm trying to nuke the Yopon and as well as control the hardwood competition, therefore prolonging the pioneer stage, prolonging this earlier stage where these shade intolerant trees are being maintained.
Certain pine trees that they do require a burn to come through.
Yes. So we call those serotinous pine cones, really. You'll see these in like Arizona, places like that. None of our pine tree species in Texas do it, but some pine cones, before they release their seedlings, they require a certain thermal temperature to crack open the pine cone and release those seeds. Table Mountain pine is a good example. You'll find it again in Arizona, areas like that. Yes, ma'am.
So you said you're prolonging the pine stage. Do you ever want it to reach a population?
For here, for my objectives on this forest, I'm trying to maintain this current stage of pioneer / early tree development stage. Now, you also have to keep in mind what your local ecosystem is, right? So the piney woods of East Texas is going to be predominantly pine trees, and that may alter what your stages of succession look like. As opposed to Central West Texas, where there really are no pine trees, it's going to look different depending on your local ecosystem, your local eco region, right? So this this pioneer stage, this climax stage for the piney woods, it may not be that predominant oak hardwood forest that wipes out all the pine trees, but maybe a smaller composition of pine trees. But for my management objectives here, I'm trying to maintain this current stage, this pine savanna for that particular species of woodpecker.
Would it be right to say you get more diversity at the early stages and then you get less diversity?
Yes, I would agree with that, yeah. Particularly in the forest floor, the understory of the forest, right? I mean, we can go out here and we could see maybe, 6, 7, 8 different species of trees. But once you start looking at the grasses, the plants, flowers, I mean, you're looking at 30, 35, 40. I mean, you guys hop on iNaturalist all the time, right? I mean, look at some of the observations out there. If you've seen the map of this place, I mean, it's littered with dots everywhere on iNaturalist of just multitude of different species that's happening. So. Insect outbreaks. This is a very iconic picture from the mid 90s. Our entomologist, Dr. Billings, took this picture from an airplane. This is southern pine beetle outbreak in East Texas. This is deep East Texas. What you're seeing is hundreds of acres of dead pine trees. So as this southern pine beetle, you could say it starts in the center of that and then starts working its way outwards. So what effect will this disturbance have on succession? Yes, insect outbreak is a disturbance, yeah. They're native, they do their thing. We detect for them every year, we put out traps. Yes, ma'am.
So does this have a lot to do with the temperature rising?
Southern pine beetle has always been an issue. I wouldn't attribute that to temperatures, but southern pine bark beetles in general, they go after stressed trees. Southern pine beetle goes after hundreds of acres of trees, but if you have pine trees in your yard that have suffered bark beetle damage, it's probably turpentine beetle or black ips beetle. Those particular species, again, detect stresses in trees. So drought, ice storms, things like that stress trees out. But they only go after 3, 4, 5 trees at a time. They're not going after swaths of forest. So that's the primary difference between them. But yes, temperature can have an effect on drought impacts to the forest.
Another question is, so I don't know, I've heard of like speaking in the way that whenever there's a tree that is distressed or something, it's proven that trees kind of distribute nutrients to kind of help that tree survive. Has that been like studied in regards to that?
You're talking like the mycorrhizal communities and like roots that are connected.
Like that.
Sure, yeah, it depends on the species.
Okay.
So aspens in particular, if y'all are familiar, like the largest living organism on Earth is a grove of aspen trees in Utah called Pando. But that's because their roots are all interconnected. And if you study this phenomena, I'll call it, of mycorrhizal communities, it's interlinking roots with one another. And like I said, it's a grove of aspen trees that are technically one organism because they're all connected. But it's thousands of individual trees in the ground, but they're all classified as one organism. So yes, but they can share nutrients with each other. They can detect disturbances in their areas and share those nutrients across them. Southern pine beetle, this one right here, most devastating. We detect for this species every single year. We have not had a significant outbreak since the late 90s. It is a native, all of them are native species. The other two that you probably had, if you own pine trees and have suffered bark beetle damage, black turpentine beetle and ips beetle.
How do you tell the difference between the two?
It's very, very difficult. You have to look at underneath the bark, they will create certain galleries. We call it galleries where they start chewing their way through. Despite their name, they're not technically eating the bark of the tree. They're actually eating the phloem layer. So this is kind of the vascular system of the trees below the bark and before the wood. There's a layer of nutrients and things. So water goes up, and then those nutrients and things that are produced from photosynthesis go down, and they get shared among the trees. So that's the layer that they're eating. They're not technically eating the wood.
So how does, with like a pine plantation, increasing the diversity of the relationships, how does that affect the pine bark? Does that concentrate them a little?
I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it helps. So like all insects, they will spread pheromones that attract other insects to that area. So it's important, like in a pine plantation setting like this, it's important to manage your number of trees per acre. So removing trees to allow more airflow through there to disperse those pheromones out can really help with that. So, and you're not having overcrowding, you're not having a lot of those stressed trees. So when I do like an earlier, I need to come into this forest, I need to remove some trees, they're growing too close, they're competing with one another, like all living organisms do, they will compete for resources, sunlight, water, nutrients in the ground. I will select and target those poorly formed trees, the trees aren't doing too well, the trees out here that are crooked, leaning, too many branches, and I'm going to cut those out because they're not doing too well. And I'm going to allow the straighter, taller trees that are doing well to grow. But I'll talk about that more, and as far as like how forest management is done. But we look at this disturbance, right? So it'll set us back, and we'll have to start all over again from this, right?
So this is set you back to stage 1 or stage 2?
This will set you back to the very, like, there will be some trees that survive this, but the impacts of a southern pine beetle outbreak, you're gonna have to come in here and salvage all this dead standing timber, because again, it does attract more. And then to manage for a southern pine beetle outbreak, you've got to create a buffer zone around all of that, clear trees out. I mean, you're looking like 20 acres in advance of all that, entirely around this outbreak here.
So were those all burned out? Did you burn
You can do salvage harvest, you know, if they haven't died too recently, you can do salvage harvest, which is salvaging some of that timber. But if it's left to stand and rot, then yeah, knock it down, burn it, leave it standing, something like
So in
that.
that case, did they do salvage harbor?
They probably did. I'm going to assume this is a national forest, and they probably did. That puts a lot of faith in the federal government to do their job, but I would hope that they did something like that. Yeah, you'll see things like blue stain fungus. Southern pine beetle leaves blue stain fungus. The hippies of Austin love blue stain fungus. No, it does create beautiful kind of striations in the wood, and you can notice it. People use it in like tiny homes. They'll use it like on the walls or things or log cabins. It does create these unique things, but you got to keep in mind how you got it.
So there's that random circle in there. It's like it's kind of like the fairy circle you get in. Is that just a different species of tree? You think?
Right there in the center. So this could be our center of our outbreak here, maybe. That could be where the center of the outbreak started and then spread out from there. It could also be, you can have different ages of trees within this, right? So you can have an even aged forest or you can have an uneven aged forest. So maybe there was some of that harvesting, like some of that gap harvesting I was talking about in that area previously, and the trees are just too young, the bark beetles aren't going to go after them. Could be things like that, but you'll see that. I mean, any disturbance, you'll see some sort of gaps throughout it too.
So the bark beetle attacks in the quarter.
Typically, sometimes you'll see it. It'll go after pretty older trees, not your fairly newer trees.
It's not just nature's way of taking care of itself.
Right, and you got to keep that in mind too, right? So the southern pine beetle's been around since the trees have been around too, right? But it obviously has an impact on the forest. There's commercial investment in some of these woods, like I mentioned before. So that's very critical to maintain that. And that's what we humans do, right? We interfere with things in Mother Nature, right? I mentioned this, but recovery stages, when we talk about succession, secondary succession, no matter what that disturbance may be or what that looks like, there's always some sort of plant community that's ready to come in behind it and starting to regrow behind that. So proper forest management can help recover from those disturbances. I talked about natural regeneration. Natural regeneration, the example here I have is a seed tree harvest. This is kind of, so Billy Bob Landowner has 50 acres of forest in East Texas. He wants to harvest some of those trees, but he doesn't, for his regeneration plan, he doesn't want to have to purchase seedlings and hire planters to plant them in the ground. He's going to rely on Mother Nature, some of the best, biggest, tallest trees he has on his forest to repopulate this forest in the future. So what he's going to do, this is his mature forest right here. He's going to identify the tallest, straightest, biggest looking trees. These will be our mother trees, right? That will produce our next crop of trees. Those trees will then drop their seedlings on the ground, producing the next cohort, the next trees. And then I'll come in and remove those mother trees after I've given them the seedlings time to grow, and then you restart the process all over. Benefits to this, purchasing trees and planting trees can be very cost prohibitive, very expensive as you can imagine. The downside to this is you get very sporadic you know, you get a lot of trees here, you get 2-3 trees here. It doesn't look like a farm, right? Like this does, right? I can look down each row and see the trees, right? That also makes it very easy to manage. Like, hey, I want you to go down this whole row and cut all those trees out. Or instead, hey man, we meander your way through this forest and kind of cut some trees out here and there. So you have to keep those things in mind. It also depends on, you know, the cost and things like that. As opposed to artificial regeneration, where this is where you think of like, there's the devastating, you know, everybody goes after the forester or the logger for the devastating clear cuts and things like that, the bad man. But having this regeneration plan of artificial regeneration in place. So I'm going to purchase the seedlings. These seedlings come from a commercial grower. They are grown and treated for insects. They're treated for diseases. They've been grown. They've traced the lineages of the father tree and the mother tree. I mean, it's a unique science, and I could bore you to death with it. But they've done these studies on what that mother tree does, what that father tree does, and they will breed those two together, making sure that this produces the tallest, fastest growing, fewest branches, biggest pine cone trees that you've ever seen. So, and that's kind of, I mean, there's 7 different variants of pine tree seedlings you can buy. So, and it all depends on cost and things like that. But then you also have to hire the people to plant them in the ground, and that can be done by what you see there, a hand planter. Some of the hardest working people I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they go out in droves and plant hundreds of acres in a day, and they do the same exact thing the next day. A lot of respect for those people. And then you also have mechanical planting. So that could be, you know, pulling a tractor with a planter machine behind it and it just drops seedlings in the ground as you go. Benefits to this, you get that defined, I want 500 trees per acre, and I know that I can meet that by planting on a 8x10 spacing, right? Or whatever that may be, whatever that converts to. The downside to this again is the cost. It's much more expensive to do that.
Why is the mother tree cut down instead of being left?
The parent trees will start, you know, we talked about shade intolerance of those pine trees, so they will start kind of competing. And obviously a much bigger tree like that is going to require a lot more nutrients compared to the younger trees. So we want to come in. And those are also our tallest, best trees that we've left there, our most commercially valuable trees. So it is important to do that sometime, to do that part of it. But sometimes you can leave them there. It all depends on the landowner's objectives, really. If you want that kind of staggered look of your forest.
Have they done any studies about areas that they've cut down the mother tree versus areas they haven't on, because you said nutrients, but have they done any studies where they leave the mother trees with the smaller and where they cut it out and compare the two?
I'm sure that they have, and I would imagine that you probably see a little less productivity by leaving the mother trees there, and also it does reduce like your available growing space as well, I would say. So as the younger trees start growing taller, they will start, you know, kind of brushing limbs and brushing tops with those mother trees and the other trees there. You'll see it out here. Sometimes it's due to mismanagement, right? Sometimes there's been a lot of foresters that have come through this place, and a forester does a seed tree harvest, and the next forester forgets to harvest the mother trees because he doesn't know they're there or something like that. So we have a couple stands like that across the street where the mother trees are still out there. But the younger trees below it are growing fine too. So and it can be hard to tell sometimes. For the next hour or so, y'all are gonna get a crash course in forestry, okay? So after this, you're gonna be
Lumberjacks.
You're going to be professional foresters. You're going to know what to do with all these forests in East Texas that we talked about. Okay. But before we get started talking about practices in forestry, I think it's important to talk about this kind of these schools of thought and land management in general, right? And in my experience of working in this career field, these different schools of thought are very often mistaken by the general public, to put it lightly. National parks, national forests, two very separate different things. State parks, state forests, two very different and separate things. In this case, National Park Service, who knows what departments National Park Service? Federal Department. Department of the Interior, right? They report to the Secretary of the Interior, who is on the presidential cabinet. Who it says right there on their logo, unfortunately, but the United States Forest Service is within the Department of Agriculture, right? Yes, two very different departments. Two very different goals. Yes,
Which
sir.
one's the Bureau of Land Management?
Department of the Interior.
Right.
You'll find Bureau of Land
Because
Management.
they're different than
Yes, and that's just, those are just two federal agencies, right?
yeah.
So within the Department of Interior, you'll find the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Mine Reclamation, something or other, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, things like that. Lots of different agencies within the Department of Interior. So let's think about the differences. So with that, right, the National Park Service, the United States Forest Service manage separate lands. They have different objectives, different goals, totally different organizations. Texas Parks and Wildlife manages state parks. Texas A&M Forest Service manages state forests. There are national forests in Texas, so national forests and state forests, again, two very different things. And like I said, this is a very, very commonly mistaken concept for folks. I hear it all the time. Yeah, I'm going to the Jones State Park. I mean, the common joke in the agency is that this is the agency state park because there's so many people out here. Our other state forests are like really hidden and secluded in East Texas, and nobody really knows about them. But the common joke for us here in this office is that yes, we manage the agency state park. But so can somebody kind of think, when we talk about the National Park Service, when you go to a national park, what are kind of your expectations when you go to a national park? Preservation, right? So when I go to a national park, I expect to see things how they were hundreds, thousands of years ago. And that's what that agency does well, is maintaining that area to look like how it worked in the past. United States Forest Service, when I go to Sam Houston National Forest, not National Park, what do I expect to see at Sam Houston National Forest? You'll see pine plantations, you'll see natural forests out there, you'll see commercial forestry operation. This multiple use ideology that we can do a lot of different things out here in the Sam Houston National Forest that, you know, we can manage for timber, we can manage to provide income. So income generated off those national forests, they tend to go back to the local counties for like road maintenance and things like that within the national forest system. You can also do things like recreation, right? I can go to the national forest, I can go reserve a camping spot, or I can go out on Lake Conroe and I can go fishing from the banks of the national forest, or I can go take my motocross bike and I can go out there and I can ride around, or I can take my horse and I can ride around. So the land can be used for different things. And our goal isn't technically preservation. Now, what starts getting confusing in all this is that both of these agencies, both of these schools of thought have designated wilderness areas. Are we familiar with the designated, like the 1964 Wilderness Act? So both of these agencies manage wilderness areas where nothing happens. I mean, you can't take a chainsaw in those areas and cut trees down. You have to go in with bow saws, or it's literally an act of Congress to take a chainsaw in there. Or if you have a fire outbreak in a wilderness area, it's often managed to let it burn, and then we'll catch it once it leaves the wilderness area, right? But if for some reason you're going in there, you have to have, I mean, like Washington, D.C. level of approval to go in there with a chainsaw, to go in there with a truck, things like that. But that's, wilderness are very different. It's a whole different ballgame when we're talking about designated wilderness areas. They are managed as if there has been no human impact whatsoever on those, except for the trail systems that go through. But the two guys, I'm sure, if you're a master naturalist, I'm sure you're well familiar with these two gentlemen here that kind of pioneered these, or like you'll associate these two guys with this. John Muir in particular, all familiar with him. Gifford Pinchot, considered the father of forestry, the first chief of the United States Forest Service. What United States presidents was both of these gentlemen buddies with? Teddy Roosevelt, right? Had a big impact on how land should be managed within the United States, right? Teddy Roosevelt. Kind of John Muir in particular, Gifford Pinchot, really pioneering, really huge advocates for the preservation of land, because timber barons of the West, timber barons of the South, of East Texas, were clear cutting thousands of acres of forest with no plan in place to restore those areas.
Is recreation a relatively new portion of the Forest Service?
No, that's always been,
It's always been
that has always been one of their things. When you go, we're structured differently. Like I said, we're structured differently, but the United States Forest Service, they have their fires people, right? And those people solely work in fire management. They respond to fires. They do fuels mitigation, things like that. And there's the recreation people. The recreation people help. They're the ones that clean the nasty vault toilets, the trailheads, or pick up trash, or they're the ones that close trails down for the season, or things like that. They can be cross-trained, right? So once fire depletes all their resources, the recreation folks can come in and help them out. But it's like really different departments within that. So there's recreation, timber folks, fire folks, things like that. Wildlife people, there's a whole different wildlife section. Yes, ma'am.
How was land decided to be one of the other agencies?
Goes back decades of when it was acquired, who purchased it. The Bureau of Land Management in particular, you'll typically find, I would say 95% of their holdings are in the Western United States. So everything, I would say, west of Colorado you'll find a lot of BLM holdings. Very, very rare. I think probably 4 or 5 sites maybe east of that line for the Bureau of Land Management. Yes, ma'am.
Is there much of a push to reacquire private lands to put it back into public land under these agencies?
The state by state basis, Texas, no, absolutely no. The United States Forest Service history in Texas in particular is a rough one. Speaking generally, as compared to the rest of the holdings in the United States, the United States Forest Service holdings in Texas are relatively new. And they were purchased through decades of time, starting back in the 40s area and then moving through the 60s. That's why in Texas in particular, you can go to the national forest, and this goes for other areas of the national forest system as well, but you'll find people's homes in the middle of the national forest because decades ago, great-great-grandpa said, heck no, I'm not selling my land to you, and I'm gonna hold it. So, that's what it looks like today. It's just, they're surrounded by national forest and they have their home in the middle of it. So we've got to keep those things in mind when we talk about federal government in particular and land management of what these different agencies do and how they manage. Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't the Bureau of Land Management do a lot of the mineral rights?
Yes, they do a lot of mineral rights as well, oil and gas leases, things like that on federal lands too. They do wildfire response as well as Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, United States Forest Service, National Park Service. Forest management objectives. I talked about our broad definition of forestry. This is just a short list of things that people manage their trees for and why people get involved in forest land ownership. Back in its heyday, people purchased trees or people purchased land because they wanted to make money. They wanted to make income, and they wanted to send grandson to school with that return on that investment. I would say in my experience, that's very much not the case anymore. People recognize the fact that there is only a certain amount of land available, and they want to own their piece of Texas. They want to own their piece of the country, and they really don't have commercial income in mind. They want to do it they want to have a weekend place to go away to with the kids. They want to go have a hunting lease. They want to have it for the recreational or aesthetics. Pollinators are a big one right now. They want to do it to help do their part in the pollinator community. But talking about timber production and historically pine plantation management, what you see out here, there's some other pine plantations here on the forest. That's a very commercial aspect of forest management, very commercialized, a lot of research done into that. Recreational opportunities, talked about this, but anything and everything you can think of as far as recreational opportunities go for that. All right, so we're going to get into our crash course of forestry and how we manage trees and what we can do on our property to help manage trees to reach these certain objectives, to reach these certain goals. So everybody's familiar with timber harvest, cutting down trees, but people often associate that with like the end of the world. It's important to keep in mind that there is some sort of regeneration plan in place, whether that be natural regeneration, relying on Mother Nature, or artificial, where I'm going to come back in and plant trees. There's some sort of regeneration plan in place before we consider harvesting. commercial timber things. When I talk about commercial timber things, that's going into a pine plantation or going into my forest and just harvesting a couple trees. They're starting to compete with one another. They're getting too close. They're growing too close with one another. So I'm going to come in, move in there and start removing a couple trees so everybody's not competing with one another. So let's start at a bare open field, a pasture, and I want to convert that to timberland. So starting off, if I'm interested in growing trees, if I want to plant trees or grow trees on this barren land, I have to start with site preparation. Site preparation is often the most overlooked part of forest management, but is the most critical and will have the most amount of impact for you in the long-term returns of your trees and how they would look in the future. So we want to give our seedlings, we want to give those trees the best chance that they have to survive and grow. And site preparation can look like a multitude of different things. What you see here is this giant V blade on this dozer. He's going to come in and remove any sorts of dead standing timber that was left over from the previous harvest. And he's going to give us a lot of space, a lot of planting space to come back in and plant trees. So we're going to pile up all the dead standing timber. We're going to let that rot, or we're going to burn it, return nutrients back to the soil. And then we're going to come back in and replant that. Outside of mechanical, you can also do prescribed burning. If I have a lot of competition in this field, there's a lot of sweet gum growing. I'm never, ever in my life going to try to grow a sweet gum forest. If you meet somebody that is, you should have a deep conversation with them. Using fire, using prescribed burning on your property can help reduce that amount of competition. And then after that fire, you come back in and plant your seedlings, and they have a much better shot at growing. Herbicides, there's a lot of contention regarding the use of herbicides. It is an effective tool. There has been a lot of research done regarding herbicides, and it is one of the tools that we use and utilize. Whatever your personal beliefs are on herbicides, you can go with, you can go without using them. There's other tools available. In general, herbicides are very good at what they do. If used incorrectly, they are very good at killing things you don't want them to. Talked about natural regeneration. This is going to be your cheapest method to reproduce a stand, to start a new stand of trees. Again, it relies on those parent trees that are left behind. You can do things like a shelter wood harvest or a seed tree harvest. It all depends on the number of mother trees you're going to leave per acre. In this setting here, in a seed tree cut, I'm probably going to leave 5 to 10 mother trees per acre in this harvesting method. As opposed to a shelter wood harvest, I'm probably going to leave somewhere between 15 to 25 mother trees per acre. It all depends on the aesthetic look of it too. If you want a little bit more denser looking forest after the harvest, you can go with that route.
My uncle live out in Crockett on several acres of land, and they did sell a bunch of their logs. They got a lot of money for that, and they were able to build their house on their land with the money they got. But I know they're not out there planting new trees to replace them. So is this probably what they? And they had someone like you come in and say, take this tree. Like, how did they know what trees?
That's probably what they're relying on. And again, your mother trees are pre-selected. So if I know I want 5 to 10 of those trees per acre, I need to go throughout that whole area that we're going to cut and identify what those look like.
It's you or someone like
me. There's private foresters that do that all the time. Yeah, I'm going to put a big red stripe on that tree, and if you touch that tree, you and I have problems about that tree. Okay, because again, that's your biggest, best looking trees because those have the best genetics for our future cohort of tree seedlings. Yes, ma'am.
It's going to take much longer to regenerate all the trees.
Yes, yeah, depending on the seedlings that you purchase, as talking artificial regeneration, you will have a much quicker head start going artificial route.
So what's done with the trees that you remove?
The trees that
Are they young? Do you replant them somewhere else?
if they're young,
Yeah.
that we remove, depending on the size of them, they can be used in what's called pulpwood. So that's all your paper products, all the 40 copies of this that I printed off today. So for job security and to promote the smaller trees like that, you can replant them and move them. On a commercial scale, when you're talking about harvesting, it's not worth it. They'll seed in and you'll get more after that.
So what is the average life to maturity here? Texas versus other parts of the country.
In an ideal optimal pine plantation setting like this, you could do a final harvest late 30s, 35, 36 on pine trees. You're coming in for a thinning around 15, 16 years old. But your final harvest where you're getting dimensional lumber, 2x4s, 4x4s, things for your homes, is around 35. As opposed to, somebody was talking to me about Canada earlier. You're looking at 112 years final harvest just because they're growing. I did a study abroad in Sweden, and their rotation cycles were 115 years long. Because keep in mind, they're growing seasons is, ours is this long and Sweden's is, a minuscule of that. It all depends on how long your growing season is. Yes, Sharon.
Have you harvested any of the 30?
No, I will say these are well past due for a thinning. Those have never been thinned once, right? So like I said, those are planted in the 80s and well past due for a thinning. Some of the challenges associated with that, it's very difficult to convince a logger to move onto 5 acres for a thinning job, right? I mean, it's costing thousands of dollars to move this machinery.
How'd you get in there anyway?
Hmm?
How'd you get in there? Because it's pretty.
Yeah, so he's going to select those rows, and they're spaced enough wide apart for him to take
It'll
out
be a whole
those.
row.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, it'll be a whole row when it comes in for a thinning.
The other day, the average age of that stand out there is 36.
This commercial time is being reduced by the breeding program.
Yes, advancements in practices as well as advancement in genetics, breedings, things like that. Other things to keep in mind, challenges associated with harvesting your timber. I talked about the size of it. Montgomery County, if you don't have, I would say you've got to have at least 40, 50 acres to convince a logger to come in and move on your site, because the economics of scale in that situation is just not worth it for them to move that amount of equipment on. We get phone calls all the time, almost every day. Hey, I've got 4 trees I want to sell. I've got 5 trees I want to sell. You know anybody who's going to buy them? I don't. If you've got 60, 70 acres, then I can help you with that. But some of the challenges associated with our area as well is, these trees have to go to a mill, right? They had to get processed. Locations of mills, there's one up in Huntsville. Other than that, you're looking at Evadale for pulpwood. I mean, that's 2.5 hours east. Taking a log truck all the way out there. Traffic. Imagine it's difficult enough for me to take a left turn in my pickup truck. Imagine a 50-foot long log truck taking a left turn on 1488 here. Those are things you have to keep in mind. Cost of diesel, right? Everything runs on diesel. Rising costs and fuel prices. Talked about artificial regeneration. Of course, the downside to this is there is a higher initial cost, but the benefits, in my mind, outweigh the negatives in this. If it was me, if it was my forest, I would go the artificial route and purchase the nicest seedlings and then plant those in the ground, because those will produce the nicest trees, therefore the bigger return on the investment income. Tree planting, I mentioned that this can be done. We saw the picture of the hand planter. This is a machine planter here. This is going to be an open land, so we're converting this into, this is going to be a pasture at some point. But if you can see, this is a tractor. There is a guy sitting right there. And there's his box of trees right there next to him. And he's got, whatever the dimensions are, 8x12 spacing, 8x10 spacing. He knows that. He's marked that on a wheel. And there's your seedlings right there.
They've pretty much prepped all the land, they've taken off all.
This is after site preparation, right? So if it was harvested previously, we've come in with those big bulldozers. We cleared off the site to give us planting area, and then I can come in. The wildland machine looks a little bit different. If there have been trees there before and there's a lot of slash and dead trees on the ground, there's going to be it's more of an enclosed. You can imagine this is an open top. You hit one stump and that guy's going to shoot up out of that car. But your wildland machines are a little bit more enclosed, a little bit safer, a little bit more structured. Those hand planters that I showed you, they get paid per tree. So they probably get, 75 cents a seedling. So imagine like how many trees you got to plant in a day to make that worth your while, right? You're bending over, putting a hole in the ground. It's got to take them like 3 seconds to put a tree in the ground and move when they start planting.
So, question.
Yes, sir.
You know, you see on the sides of the roads when they're going to go and put the new down or something, they do this, that seeds great.
Yeah, like hydromulching.
That thing with, I know something about that. Is that everything that we do with trees? Do we ever do like a seed spray over an area?
No, because what you're gonna have in the long run is gonna be overcrowding of it's gonna be a dense mess. Imagine what that looks like, right? Once those trees start getting taller. I mean, you could, I guess, if that was your goal.
Back years ago, the U.S. Forest Service tried aerial seeding, where they were dropping seeds out of helicopters. But what that produced was severe overcrowding. We found that the benefit wasn't there due to the overcrowding, disease, impacting the environment.
There are advancements in drone technology these days where they can plant trees using drones. But I showed the ceiling here. So that's a plug. It's a containerized, we call it containerized ceiling, but it has a plug of soil on it, and it's one single tree. So that drone's going to carry that and shoot that into the ground. Herbicide weed control. This can be done through numerous different methods. That picture on the left is obviously not from Texas, given the mountain ranges in the back. But you can do, I mean, that's large scale, right? To make that an aerial operation, those mountain ranges have to be pretty desolate where there's no vehicular access to that, or it's going to be hundreds of acres that they're spraying. Typically, if you're doing that in Texas, it looks like the picture on the right. That's the machine. It has a herbicide tank on the back, but that's actually a skidder. That's the machine that will pull trees out of the forest and into the log deck for processing. But that just gets retrofitted with a spray tank on it. I talked about thinning. This is what that looks like. This is our plantation on the left, and then I'm going to select rows. This is an odd thinning regime here, but you can do what's called third row or fourth row thinning. So every third row in that pine plantation, I'm going to take out, or every fourth row, every fifth row. There's studies between each one's things. Really doesn't make that much of a difference. It just depends on aesthetically what you want to look like. Typically, it's going to be third row, fourth row, some things like that. But you just take the entire row out. But the benefits of that, you can see kind of there. This tree right here is not in that row, but if it's not doing well and it's a neighbor to that row that's getting cut, I can reach in and take that one out too, creating more space. A commercial thinning is bringing me revenue midway through my rotation cycle, right? So it's not the most optimal final product. It's not dimensional lumber, but it is pulpwood products, right? It's going to go to the paper mill and get processed into paper plates, things like toilet paper, things like that. So I get some return on my investment halfway through my rotation cycle, which is the benefits of thinning, economically speaking. Timber stand improvement practices. This is going to be things like targeting invasive species, targeting species that you don't want. This is mainly done for like Chinese tallow, sweet gum, things like that. The picture there is called hack and squirt. You take a machete, you chop into the cambium layer of the tree and spray some herbicide in it, and it kills the tree. Or girdling the tree. It's known as that as well. But you can imagine how labor intensive that is. That's something I don't want to do. So there's lots of other machines you can use for that as well. Talked about prescribed burning. If you've been in the forest, if you've been here in the past couple of months or so, we've been burning a lot. We've burned up here. You'll see it later today if you're sticking around for the service project. But we burned up here. We burned across the street. It is a very East Texas is a fire-dependent ecosystem. So long before humans were here, wildfires would start and rip across East Texas, and nothing would stop them, right? And they would just naturally put themselves out. Thus, creating this cycle of maintaining species that we don't want, maintaining the hardwood species, maintaining the yaupon and the forest floor. So that was occurring naturally. But as this fire regime kind of went away, you see the negative downsides of that. You see this dense understory thickets of yaupon that pine seedlings can't really grow in. Of all the methods that I talked about today, prescribed burning is the cheapest. You know, it takes a couple gallons of gasoline and diesel mixed up, and then you got to pay your labor to go in there and drag the drip torches, and then you got to have maybe a bulldozer or two around. But compared to herbicide spraying or other mechanical like mulching operations, far cheaper than anything else.
From an environmental perspective, which ways prefer curb, fire, and smoke?
Environmentally, I would say smoke, prescribed burning. There can be health effects associated with smoke exposure. So we have to have, prescribed burning isn't just, oh, today looks like a good day, let's drop a torch and light this stuff off. It's very specific weather parameters that have to be met before I can even consider doing that, right? So I'm like a week in advance, like, hey, Wednesday looks good, but the wind speeds has to be this much. It can never be a cloudy day because the smoke column is going to hit that cloud layer and it's going to put smoke. And this place in particular, right? I've got 1488, I've got I-45, I've got Jacobs Reserve. I can't be putting smoke on those neighborhoods, subdivisions, interstates. So you have to make sure you have enough lift and enough spread to get that smoke dispersed. That's your problem with prescribed burning, is the smoke management part of it. Not so much the actual flames on the ground part, but the smoke management is really the most intensive part of that. Now there's certain areas that I can't burn. Certain areas up to homes, like I can't burn within 300 feet of a home. And that's a lot of the northern portion up here that every boundary of this place, to be honest with you, I can't burn within 300 feet of it. So I can rely on herbicides. Again, those have to be very specific. I can't be spraying herbicides when it's blowing 30 miles per hour outside, because I'm going to blow chemicals into everybody's backyard. But, and then in places where I can't use that, then I use mulching, which is a big giant drum machine, chops up everything. You saw it in that Ponderosa video. So it all depends on what you have and what you've got. Prescribed burning is what happened in the past. It replicates what we want. It's the cheapest. It's just, it depends on where you are. Not everybody can burn. Not everybody has the resources in place to burn.
If the understory is too thick and there's too much fuel down there, would that damage the trees you're actually trying to?
Yes, that's what you need to keep in mind. If it is too dense, either your fire won't carry, it'll go out on you, or it will be too thick and will start burning your trees, which you don't want. So you have to find this fine line. If burning is an option for you right now, then you need to go in with a mulcher, with a bulldozer or something, knock that down, allow that to grow, and then you can come in with a burn and start burning that off slowly. So it all depends on what phase you're at too.
For the gas and diesel, do you use like recycled or fresh?
Fresh. It'll be 3 parts diesel to 1 part gasoline. Mature stand activities. This is what, this is that iconic picture of a clear cut harvest that people associate forestry with or logging with. Again, if I'm going to do a clear cut here, which regeneration method am I going to rely on? Artificial or natural? Artificial, right? Because there's no trees left to you'll get some blow in from the surrounding areas, right? But certainly not enough to repopulate that whole area. So if I want a clear cut harvest, I have to do artificial regeneration. I will be purchasing seedlings. I will be planting those seedlings in the ground to restore that forest. As opposed to, again, the seed tree harvest, like I said, this leaves your biggest, best, tallest looking trees there for you. And those will then serve as your parent or your mother trees for the next cohort.
Another question, sorry.
Yes, sir.
So when you come through and do a clear cut, and you come back through and do a plant, are you keeping the stumps and everything?
Typically, and you just plant around them. The biggest issue is I've said the term slash. It's debris. It's the branches. It's the limbs. It's the things that don't get taken to the mill, and they're just either redistributed on the site or they're left in big piles. That's your most issues right there. You just need to clear that stuff out of the way. But typically, it's never worth it to remove the stumps unless it's like your home or like you're doing it for aesthetic reasons or things like that. But you typically just plant around them.
question about, so you've got, if you're clear cutting, you have water feature, a stream or something like that, it's being done to protect the.
We're going into that right now. Best management practices. These are, in Texas, these are voluntary forest management practices. Some other states, these are mandatory. Donna works here. She's our next speaker. Donna is big in our BMP compliance program as well. But even though this program is voluntary in Texas, you do see a lot of compliance with this. Above 90% or more, Donna? Yeah. And this goes to like commercial loggers. So our foresters will come in and see if they're complying with those BMPs, as we call them. And it's generally well accepted because mills, processing places, they have to purchase certified wood, right? Like if you've seen, like if you have a notebook or something, you've seen like an SFI logo on it or FSC logo. These are third-party certification boards that say that this paper, this product was harvested sustainably. And those are third-party certification boards. And part of that certification is that you're properly managing the woods that timber comes from. And working with that is these best management practices. So here's a couple of examples. Streamside management zones. These are help to stabilize stream banks as well as to reduce pollution and erosion along those stream banks. Forested roads, you can do things like water bars. Roads are going to be your biggest contributor of pollutants into a stream or water body. You can imagine a bunch of log trucks and things like that going down. So they need to be constructed properly so they're not causing sedimentation and things like that into the streams and creeks. Here's what's done whenever you have a stream or creek within your harvest area. So this is a clear cut and you can see that it's been replanted or so, but where the trees are still standing is a stream and creek there. So what they've done, they've identified that and they've gone at least a minimum of 50 feet on either side of the creek, starting at the bank, and they work their way 50 feet out on each side, at least. Depending on topography, depending on the steepness of the bank, you can go out further, 100 and 150 feet or so. But we typically recommend at least a minimum of 50 feet on either side of the bank. And this helps prevent some of that runoff and erosion and things like that in the stream creek. And you can do some sort of harvesting, you can do a little bit of management in here, but more often than not, nothing is really done in these areas to help protect those water bodies. So water bars here, water bars are designed to kind of divert the flow of water. As you can imagine, rain and water coming down a road is kind of just a slide and goes straight down it. So if you can design things in place to help divert that flow of water, a water bar works hand in hand with a wing ditch. So you'll see so this is the water bar here, and then it flows into the wing ditch. So as water comes down this edge, it meets this water bar, and then the water bar puts it off into the wing ditch. And the wing ditch is shaped in a J shape. So as the water flows into it, it shoots back up into the stand that you've harvested. It's important to make sure that wing ditch doesn't go directly into the creek or stream because you just defeated the purpose on it, right? So that J shape to that wing ditch is very, very important. Forest health issues. This is a very short list. These are things that I can think of, things that I think are some of the biggest current problems, or in Emerald ash bore's case, on the way problems. Oak wilt is a big of concern. I mean, oak wilt happens all the time in oak species. You'll probably see it everywhere. Hypoxylon canker, another common one that happens a lot. I've seen a lot in water oak species. Pine bark beetles, we've talked to lengths about pine bark beetles today and the damage that they can cause. Emerald ash borer. If you're not familiar with this one, we're about to talk more about it. And the leaf cutting ant.
How close to Houston is the oak wilt?
There's been 1 or 2 detected cases of oak wilt in Harris County. There have been none detected in Montgomery County. Oak wilt is a much bigger concern in Central and West Texas than it ever is here. I talked about the 3 different species, so 3 different types of bark beetles you can have here in East Texas. Southern pine beetle, I showed you that picture of it. You have black turpentine and Ips bark beetle. So there's that picture again. There's a southern pine beetle. Those are those galleries I'm talking about there. This is underneath the bark. Kind of this S-shaped pattern to it.
We've had in Mercer, we've had a outbreak of some kind of our fecal infection. Lost like probably a massive.
Yeah, the telltale sign of these, you'll see these right here. These are called pitch tubes. It looks like a wad of gum on the side of the tree or something like that, but this comes out of the exit hole, or the hole that the bark beetle makes into the tree. Yes, yes, you've had either Ips, bark beetle, or the black tree.
That big patch of dead trees there only because it's a wilderness area. They don't let you go in there and control things. So they just have to let nature take its course.
I talk, yeah, we mentioned wilderness areas, right? And what you can and can't do there. So, but once it leaves that, then we can look at buffer strips and things around that too. So, emerald ash borer. I've got some data on this one coming up. I think we're at 10. We got a lot of counties last year. Do you know, Donna? Like, are we up to like 9, 10 counties in Texas? DFW picked up a lot this past summer, this past season. Emerald ash borer. This is it. It's kind of pretty. It's a pretty looking kind of thing. Green metallic. Obviously, it targets ash trees. There's no known treatments to stop this thing. It is coming from east and moving west. It will be here. We deployed traps all over East Texas for this. This is what this purple thing is here. Carter loves these things. You can talk to him about it all day long. So this is it's essentially I would say it's not cardboard, but it's corrugated plastic. It makes a triangle, and there's like the stickiest, most awful glue you can think of in the world is put on the side of this. And then we hang a pheromone inside of that, and that attracts them. So that's how we detect. Again, this is just a detection trap. This is not to kill it or anything like that. This is merely just for detection. No, it's smaller than a penny.
No, it's native.
Native. No, it's invasive.
Any natural predators?
No. Here's a picture of the damage that's done. This is a kind of street in Toledo, Ohio. 2006 on the left, and then 2009 on the right, just the damage that can cause. So this map is a little out of date. Again, Tarrant County and surrounding counties really popped off this past summer, past year. There's probably, I would say, like 5 of the surrounding counties outside of Tarrant picked up. At first was detected over there in Northeast Texas, as you can see. Any guesses on how it made its way to Tarrant County? Yeah, so there's a pretty big major interstate corridor that goes that exact direction, right?
Yeah, up in New York State, you're not allowed to bring firewood from different camps.
So that map shows 14 counties within Texas. That's managed and maintained by the Texas Department of Agriculture. So they will quarantine certain counties, and you're technically not supposed to move wood out of those counties. But yeah, pretty major interstate corridor that goes from that area all the way there to Tarrant County. Okay, I got a couple minutes here. I talked about this a little bit earlier. Wildfires in Texas, believe it or not, you see it all the time, out west, California, places like that are constantly burning. Texas is not immune to that. Texas has plenty of wildfires every year. We have plenty of wildfires here in Montgomery County, but you never hear about them because they're half an acre, 1 acre, 2 acres in size. But Texas is not immune to wildfires. Particularly 2011 was the most destructive fire season that the state has ever had in record. Over 3.5 million acres were burned, 3,000 homes destroyed. That map on the right shows the damage to Bastrop State Park. I want to say something like 94% of the park was burned over. Picture on the left, very iconic picture outside of Bastrop of what's going on during the Bastrop complex fire. time.
What was the cause of that fire?
I'm not sure what that was. So a complex is going to be, a complex is when there's multiple wildfires within the relatively same area. What'd you say, Carter? Hay baler. So a complex is managed, multiple wildfires are managed as one. So in a complex, you have 6, 7 fires going on in the same general area. Yeah. But humans are like 90% of the cause of wildfires, and the other 10% is going to be lightning. So you get like hay balers, lawnmowers striking rocks, your trailer chains dragging on the road creates sparks. Welding is a big issue too. You know, the amount of sparks that welding shoots off. A welder pulls up his truck and dry dead grass, and he's got his welding shield on, and behind them there's a big wildfire going on behind him. These are just some things to think on, challenges to our forests as we move into the future in different ecoregions of Texas. Population growth and urbanization across the state, not just in the piney woods, but across Central and West Texas as well. As communities grow and ever expand and populations grow, what can local communities do? What can you do? What can organizations do to help prepare in advance for that, and then anticipate what impact that might have on forest resources within the state? Central Texas, they're very prone to oak wilt. Oak wilt is a mass concern in Central Texas, as well as the wildland urban interface. So that's when people build homes out in the sticks and they enjoy living out there, but that creates numerous challenges associated with wildfire suppression, wildfire management. What can we do out there? East Texas, rapid urbanization, right? We're witnessing it every day. As you drive up 45, there's a new subdivision going up. There's less trees present. There's more trees cut down. What can we do to ensure that there are trees into the future? What things can be done to help protect that wood timber resource in East Texas? Water quality, using things like best management practices. What are some other things that we can do to help protect the water quality? As populations increase, the demand for water increases too, right? And you see it out in states in the West, so there's often water challenges or water shortages and things of that nature. What can we do to help protect that resource here in the state of Texas? And the benefits that forested environments provide to watersheds and those water bodies that we use every day. Yes, sir.
Y'all do any kind of outreach with the developers that are going and creating these communities, or even after that, when they have their planting guidelines for what a house is putting on trees?
There has been some outreach in that areas. I would say that's more of a city ordinance issue. If you live in Conroe area, the city of Conroe has certain ordinances on developers and the amount of trees that they have to leave present when they're developing areas. It was a big thing of contention very recently regarding that.
What about outside the cities?
Outside the cities, you typically slick every tree in sight and get 2 live oaks in your front yard, is what I've seen typically in that. And then a curious thing to me is HOAs, when they give you a list of species that you're only allowed to plant these species, but it's very few natives and there's some invasives on there and things like that. I try to work with those HOAs on, hey, there are some alternatives available to you and there are some things that are missing off this list that definitely need to be on your list. And there are some things on your list that absolutely need to come off of your list. So I try to reach out to those HOAs and things like that. Developers, it's typically, cost driven, the cheapest thing they can do. Volunteer opportunities, Jaden doesn't know, I'm about to plug him right here. If you're looking for volunteer opportunities to get your hours, we're having field trips, conservation education programs here on the forest. Please reach out to Jaden. He is our conservation education coordinator. That's his email address for you, so Jaden cannot hide from you. Yes, ma'am.
I've been here long enough to watch 14 movies.
About to be 6. Plans that I've heard is that They will use their existing corridor. 242 has an expansion in place as well, but they plan to use the existing corridor for that and will take no additional land. If you're around this area, 2017 or so, there was a big push to develop part of this forest by a certain local legislator. That kind of made a complete 180, and now the forest has legislation in place to protect it from any sorts of development except for the Texas Department of Transportation.
So they're gonna have drainage problems and everything else.
We've witnessed drainage problems here on the forest already, just due to apartment complexes, the concreteness and the non-permeable surfaces surrounding the forest, right? Once forested areas that we're able to cycle that water through, now those concrete pads dump it onto the forest. So.
That much for me is some text about lines.
I'm not gonna comment on the agency.
They are taking some acreage for detention.
Are you texting?
No.
The 242 expansion, they are putting detention ponds in place. This forest in particular, they're not taking any land. 1488, I mean, to my knowledge, they're just gonna take the shoulders away.
The first time they wiped it, they were taking some of the forest. We went through several years of trying to work out that they would be permanently taking out red cockaded woodpecker. You know, the time was crowded. They weren't using it, but I didn't comment. But anyway, so they took out, I think, 12 acres. So they had to mitigate for that, and they gave us some money to offset that loss to do some mulching. At the time, we didn't have mulching machines, but they gave us money to do like 340 or 350 acres.
They just don't have to start building all these big houses.
Like Donna said, TxDOT is very aware of the presence of an endangered species in this forest.
42 at Gosling now.
So they're very aware of that, and they consistently reach out to us for our input on that. And I will say that to them, that we have had numerous meetings with the Department of Transportation, and they always bring us on in the very early stages of that. Like, and they're very, very, very much aware of the endangered species here. And if you go to the public meetings and they throw out a map of 1488, and once it hits the forest, you'll see comments all over it, like, stay away from here, don't touch this place, save your trees, things like that. Yes, ma'am.
Last question.
Yeah, last question, then we gotta get Donna up here.
So for those of us who have to deal with HOAs like that, do you have any suggestions if we notice like that they have invasive species that the proven not to do about it?
I would say do your research. I mean, you're in a perfect program right now to learn more about native species and the benefits of them, as well as the benefits they provide birds, wildlife, pollinators, things like that. You know, examine that species list. What is on here that shouldn't be on here? And then provide them a good substitute. Hey, here's a native substitute that will work just as well and provide you with, you know, food or habitat or color if, you know, wildflowers. I'm going to hang around. I will be here if you have.
Well, I am Donna Work, obviously with the Texas A&M Forest Service. My office in here, but this is kind of my office away from office during this time of year when the red cockaded woodpeckers are nesting. But my office is actually in Lufkin, and I've been with the agency 32 years. Right now, I started off in forest pest control, forest pest management. Started off in bark beetle research and leaf cutting ants and tip moths and other insects that harm the pine seeds and pine cones. And now I am part of the Water Resources Program, where we talk to loggers and landowners and the public about forestry best management practices, which Connor touched on. And I'm with the Forest Stewardship Program, which is a part, that's what the woodpeckers are part of the Forest Stewardship Program. And as of January, I am the new Forest Legacy Coordinator, and that deals with getting conservation easements on large tracts of special lands to help keep working forest in forest, but also protect the special longleaf restoration they're doing, or special sites or waterfalls or special historic sites or natural ecologically important tracts of land. But I'm here to talk about the red cockaded woodpecker today, and it's a small black and white bird. I'll see if we can hear it. I think if I do it this way, it will do it. Because since they're not nesting, there you go. Like with a lot of birds, you hear them first before you ever see them. So that's why I want you to hear the sound. We may or may not hear them today since they aren't nesting yet. I can't guarantee they'll come in and check us out. I've already had one of the birders out there. Where's the best place to find the woodpeckers? I told them, I said, but you may not find them this time of day. But when they're nesting, you're more likely to see them then. But it's a small black and white bird, about the size of a cardinal or a blue jay. There's reflection on that screen for me, but I can see it here. So, and it's similar to two other of the woodpeckers that we have here in East Texas. The red cockaded woodpecker is on the top left, and then on the top right is the downy woodpecker, which is smaller than the red cockaded, and then the hairy woodpecker, which is down below. I think I straightened him up. There we go. The hairy woodpecker is larger than the red cockaded woodpecker, but they're very similar. But just by looking at this, it's kind of hard on this photo, but if you remember the first photo I showed, what difference do you see between these birds right here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and actually, yeah, the downy looks like it has a much shorter tail too, but yeah, shorter tail. The red cockaded woodpecker is one of the there is a species of ladderback woodpeckers, but they're also considered like in a group of ladderback woodpeckers because of the speckles on their back. It looks like a ladder. And these two guys start to have that, but they don't quite. You see the dark parts of their wings and then the black of the white patch down their side. But the easy way to see is if you look at their cheeks, the downy and the hairy have a black stripe goes across their cheek, and the red cockaded woodpeckers have a white cheek patch. You may see that right there. Oh, there's a little spot on it's going to be hard to see in the field, but there's a little spot there at the bottom of the downy's feather right down there. And you can see with the red cockaded, it's a solid white cheek patch. There's a little cheek patch right there. Now the red on the red cockaded woodpecker is a little patch of feathers, and it's only on the male. And in the adult males, it's in an area behind the eye, kind of where maybe you would think an ear would be or something like that. It makes reference to like an old military hat, put a cockade, a feather in the military cap. And that's kind of back in that area. That's why it's called that. I have a lot of people say, oh, when those comes to my grandmother's feeder. Well, they're not going to come to your feeders. And oh yeah, I saw lots of red. That was it. No, you're not going to see the red unless you're really lucky. So and this one is fluffed up. He's kind of upset and angry, and you can see why. So his feathers are kind of fluffed up right now. But even out in the field, it's hard unless they're irritated and they're fluffing feathers up, or the sun's shining on them and they're scratching, and you can see that, so it's hard to see. This one is a young male, and it's a juvenile male, and it was hatched this year. Actually, it's it was hatched the year this photo was taken, and it's got a red patch on top of the head. When they molt for the first time, September, October, and get all their adult feathers in, then the red has gone off the top of the head and it's back behind the eye again. So if I look inside a tree, and if this guy hasn't fledged yet, or if I see a newly fledged bird and I see the red on top of the head, I know automatically it's a male. Otherwise, it'd be really hard to tell. Now, who thinks they know who the artist of this picture is? Audubon, right. John James Audubon, very good. And I think this is a really neat picture of when I work with this bird, it's my bird, and I didn't know till a few years back that he even painted them. I said, well, that's pretty cool. I put this in here because I think it's pretty interesting of his experience with the red cockaded woodpecker. I didn't think about it before until somebody else mentioned it to me, but he has a lot of beautiful paintings of the birds. But he had to have subject matter, and how did he get that subject matter? Anyway, well, this is something from an article that I saw here on the red cockaded woodpecker, and he said this species, which was the first described by Wilson, probably recognize that name if you're a birder, is found abundantly from Texas to New Jersey. They're not New Jersey anymore, and inland as far as Tennessee, not in Tennessee anymore. Near Bayou Sarah in Louisiana, I once slightly wounded 2 males, which I put into my hat in order to carry them home, which we cannot do nowadays. The first, on being brought to the ground, was easily secured, but the case was different with the other, for at once at once hopped off towards the nearest tree, crying loudly all the while. They are very vocal birds. And on reaching it, ascended as if unhurt. However, I obtained it by accidentally knocking off the bark with a clod of earth. So I would be under the jail if I did that to them. Anyway, it shows you how things have changed. It defended itself courageously and pecked at my fingers with so much vigor that I was obliged to let it drop several times out of my hand. And so I put a little reference. You may not can see it; it's not very bright, but I put a reference on there where I got that actual article. This is a map of their historic distribution, and you can see, like he says, it went on up to New Jersey, Maryland, and all those eastern seaboard states, and come all the way to East Texas. East Texas is the easternmost part of their range. East Texas and southeastern Oklahoma. There's some little outlier out here that was found in North Texas that I don't know, the winds were blowing really fast or something like that. I don't know. And it shows it going way down the coast, which it does not do now. This is the current range. They don't fill in all of these, the purple splotches right here. They don't fill in that area, but within those areas are where the woodpeckers are now. So you can see that's drastically different. And actually you need to take out the Kentucky, Tennessee spot right there, because several years ago, bark beetles killed the few pine trees that were left where these woodpeckers were living, but fortunately people captured them and moved them down south. So how they did down here, I don't know, but still these few states right here are the ones that still have populations of the woodpeckers. In Texas, this is their historic distribution here, all the way up to the Red River and all the way down to Liberty County and Orange County, Jefferson, Orange County, and so all the way down to the coast. Currently, and this still needs to be updated as well. This is their current distribution, and the different, like the solid pink ones are where there's more populations of them, and that's going to be on the Sam Houston National Forest here, on some private lands. The hatching is where there's less populations as well, but we know that you can probably take out Nacogdoches County, which is, again, I can't see that very well. Nacogdoches. Anyway, Nacogdoches County right up here, up there, and probably no more in Polk County, where they were last seen in Polk County was on the Indian Reservation, Alabama Coshada, and where it is, they're not there anymore either. So this is the habitat that they were adapted to living in a long time ago. Usually longleaf pine, but nice open pine stands that they say you can ride a horse through full gallop and not get knocked off the horse. Like most endangered species, their declining numbers come from habitat loss. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the settlers coming from the east and coming this way cut down the trees. They harvested the trees to build their barns, their corrals, their houses, to clear land for farming and that sort of thing. And of course, back then they didn't know better. After a while, they finally started realizing, hey, if we don't start planting this back, it is a renewable natural resource. If we don't start planting these back, we're not going to have any more. So in the 30s, they started that and started planting back. So the trees you see out here are generations away from that. This is the habitat that they like and what it looks like nowadays. Again, nice, open. It's not always longleaf pine. There are a few places where they are in longleaf pine, but we have much less. We're down to a little less than 4% or 3% of what was originally here in the US. So all over the US, we're down to that little of longleaf pine, but we're pushing for people to restore longleaf pine, and there's a longleaf initiative, all sorts of initiatives across the South to start back to replanting longleaf pine. But here, they use what they have. So in Texas, they're going to be in loblolly pine or shortleaf pine or longleaf as well. Could be some in slash, but here in Texas, and that's not a Texas native, but here in Texas, they're going to mostly be in loblolly and shortleaf and some in longleaf pine. And on this forest, we mostly have loblolly, so that's what they are here on this forest. They need the large, mature pine trees to build their cavities in. And they're the only woodpecker in North America that builds the cavities that they roost in at night and that they nest in during nesting season in live pine trees. Other woodpeckers are going to either take advantage of one that is built by the red cockaded woodpecker in a live tree or go to a dead tree or what we call a dead snag and build cavities in that where it's much easier. And there's a good strategy to using live pine trees. I'll show you that here in a minute. but they tend to be able to find, we haven't figured out how yet, but they can find the pine trees that have a disease called red heart rot. And it's a fungus that gets into, fungus that gets into the center of the tree, the heartwood of the tree that's only pretty stout, but that helps to soften, that doesn't kill the tree necessarily, but it helps to soften that heartwood of the tree and makes it easier. If you're pecking your beak against a tree and you're trying to excavate a cavity, which can take 1, 2, or 3 years or more, then you want it to be as soft as possible. So they pick those trees, and this little conch, the mushroom on the side of it there, is sometimes if you see that, that's a sign that inside the tree is that fungus. And it's going to, and that's just a manifestation of that fungus inside, is this conch on the outside. That's what it kind of looks like right there. A little easier. I mean, it's not, it looks spongy, but it's not soft like a sponge, but it's much less dense than the heartwood would normally be. So that's what they, you choose the larger trees that have enough room for them to build a cavity and that hopefully have that red heart rot. This is what we call a start tree that they have started. Nice little smooth inside and a little round circle about 2 inches in diameter. They've just started this one. It hadn't been completed yet. Here's a completed cavity. And I can tell that they've finished, and now they're starting to peck away through the bark, getting to the sap layer and letting the sap flow down, kind of like melted candle wax. And that shows, okay, they're starting to use that tree. They want to use this, the pine sap as a defense and also a territory marker. Here's another picture you can see a little bit better. You can see that the sap, again, looks like melted candle wax. It looks fresh. It looks sticky. The little, what we call resin wells, the little holes that they peck to make the sap come out. The bark on it is brownish instead of the gray that normally would be on the outside, so they've been working on it. And this helps to defend their territory. It shows other birds, other woodpeckers are pretty territorial, and it shows other red cockaded woodpeckers, hey, there's a family here. This is our territory, and they see that fresh sap and everything. They know that's a banner that kind of shows other woodpeckers that this territory is taken. It also helps them if they're flying through the woods and they're getting like a sparrow, kestrel is after them, and they want to get away from the hawk, then they can easily find that little 2-inch hole and dive into that. But mainly it's a good deterrent to their major predator, the rat snake. They can climb up rough furrowed bark, they can climb up brick walls, they can climb up things like that, but the rough furrowed bark of a pine tree, they can get up pretty easily. They can get in there and eat the eggs, they can eat the young in a tree. So if they get up there, but there's this good, nice, every morning they're going to work on their sap layer. If it's good, nice and sticky, it's going to get up there and irritate their belly scales to where they're going to back on off the tree. So that's a big defense for them. Here's one a little close up, and I'm showing you extra pictures here, and I'll also show it at the end. So if you're out on the forest sometime and you see one of these trees and it's not all of them are painted green, they have a green band paint around them, but some of the new ones are not painted green, but and some of them may have flagging on it, but if it's one that looks like nobody's marked it with the flagging, or they haven't started shaving the bark off of it or something, then you can report it to me, give me a coordinates, a lat lawn or something like that, and I can go check it out. This one is another active one. You can see the brownish bark where they've chipped away at the bark. The sap's flowing good and fresh. If it's several years old, it'll get to where the bark near the hole right there, the bark around it, they've worked on it so much that they've caused a plate to where there's no more bark there and it's just the wood showing like that. So it shows they've been working on that one for a while. Yeah, I know, that's what I think too. This is what it looks like on the inside. This is pretty simple. They go into the center of the tree. Again, the outside diameter of the entrance hole is about 2 inches in diameter. They go downwards about 6 or 7 inches or so, and that's it. It's real easy. They don't put in nesting material. They don't put in leaves or pine straw or feathers or anything. They just peck away on the edge of the cavity, and there's maybe a few little bark shavings down there. Yes, ma'am.
How do they get the stuff out? By their
Beak by beak. When I've seen them, they'll peck a little bit and they'll come in here, spit out that beak. So just a little bit of sawdust, one beak at a time. It takes forever. If they really get after it, it can be several months, but usually it's a year plus, sometimes 2, 3 to 6. Yes.
That's what I was gonna say. It takes about 2 years to make this.
Yeah, and it varies, just depends on probably the size of the tree and how industrious they are. I've seen them maybe do it in a year, but Average is probably 2 years, 3. I've heard of it going on up to 6, but sometimes they'll leave one and come back to it. So that may count in there.
Their average lifespan.
The lifespan, I've heard 8 or 9 years in the wild. Uh-huh. Yes.
Will you ever see more than one of these on one tree or?
Yes, you will. Usually it's, and it's only one bird per cavity. So in a family group that's made up ideally of a breeding male and a breeding female and hopefully a helper bird or two. And the helper birds are actually previous year's hatches and they stick around to help incubate eggs, take care of the young and defend the territory. And if something happens to dad, the breeding male, then this one can step up and take over the top breeding spot, find his own female and carry the family on. But they live in kind of the same general area, the family does. And but one bird per cavity. Usually it's one cavity per tree, but I've seen them, 2 active ones in a tree. Sometimes I've seen like 4 or 5 cavities that have been over time put in the tree that they built in the tree, but just one bird living in one of those cavities. But I've seen 2 birds living in one tree before. Yes.
How do they deal with like the sap on their wings and stuff?
Right. Yeah, they do have to go through, once they have the entrance hole done, and they do have to deal with sap coming down there. A lot of times that'll kind of seal off up there or whatever, but they do have to deal with sap. Sap is still going to drip on there and they just kind of get in and out, I guess, quick enough to do that. But inside the tree, it's not, the sap's isn't going to come there. It's just that thin layer between the bark and the wood of the tree.
How does that impact the longevity of the tree?
It doesn't really kill it. They still can live a long time, except it does make them weaker there. So when we have high winds, if it's one of these woodpecker cavity trees, they tend to snap off at that point because it is weaker. It doesn't really kill the tree. It's not like they're girdling the tree. Like if you took a knife and went all the way around the tree and cut off that vascular system, that would be girdling the tree and would kill it. But this is just one side that's kind of changed the dynamics a little bit. But it's not really known to kill the tree, except it does make it weaker.
So why would they move from one tree to another?
They usually stay in one tree for a while, but sometimes either another critter is going to take it over, like other birds. I've seen a tufted titmouse in one. Other woodpeckers, like the pileated woodpecker and the red-bellied, will take advantage of this, and it's already built. Okay, I just got to make the door bigger, and they enlarge it, and then they can enlarge the whole thing and move into it. And the woodpeckers aren't real good about defending their house. But they'll usually stay in the same tree, but those, either another critter taking it over or flying squirrels taking it over. I've even seen where that was so enlarged by pileated woodpeckers that wood ducks came out of one. I've seen it once and I've heard of it more times than that. So other critters will take it over. If that entrance gets too big, they don't feel safe and they will move on for that. Or if the tree dies, even on this forest, I've seen them living in it for the first few months after it dies, but when it dies, no sap production is coming out, so they'll move to another tree. Or sometimes they just get funky and they're all fungusy or something, or if it's not built just right, rainwater gets in there. I've seen them change for that. So usually they'll stay in the same tree, but they're constantly working on, or they're often working on other trees that they can move into. And we can supplement that with artificial cavities like this. And Connor's got one back there. There's one in real life. Back in, I think it was Hurricane Hugo, back in 90 or just before 1990, Hurricane Hugo came and hit the Carolinas, and there's a lot of red cockaded woodpeckers out there, and it demolished a lot of their cavity trees. And so he said, man, we got to come up with a way to have ready-made homes for these birds, or have something like this available for the birds. And that's when this came about. It's basically cedar, a chunk of cedar that they've drilled down this way, and then that way they topped it off with pine plywood to keep the sap from the tree from getting into it. So it's kind of sealed off. Nowadays they put PVC pipe in some of them because even with these are really seem to attract the other woodpeckers, pileateds and red bellies, the larger ones, and that keeps the other woodpeckers from enlarging the cavity. But I still see them, and when you'll see some today, when it's flushed into a tree, I still see the pileateds picking around it on the outside. So they'll find a way. And that one up there has mesh on the front, and that's one way to also prevent that, but it's mainly so when the birds fly up, they can they have something to latch onto if they're feeding young, or before they just go right into the hole, they can latch onto the side. But it's mainly there for protection to keep the other woodpeckers from tearing it up. Again, this is probably that one right there. And so they look similar inside. They're similar in shape and size and everything to the normal cavity. And that's what they look like on the inside. And same thing when if they're nesting, or if they want something in the bottom of the hole, they'll just peck away at the side of this and use the wood chips down there. This is how those are installed. Someone with a short barred chainsaw, about a 12-inch barred chainsaw, can climb up in the tree, cut out a rectangle. And once it gets to this point, they have to kind of slice it and chip it out with a chisel, chip out all that wood. And then they take the artificial cavity, they cover it with wood putty, carpenter's putty, to keep the sap from getting into the seams of that, and slide it on into the tree. That's what it looks like here. Sometimes they have to put in shims if the hole's a little big. And there it is. In 30 minutes, they've got it. They doctor up the front to look a little bit more natural, spray paint it brown, put the putty on it, and then the white paint they spray on. Everybody has their own little design of paint. I used to tell who put that one in because of their little design. I mean, not fancy, not pictures, but just how they put the white stripes up there. But the white stripes up there are to mimic the natural sap flowing down that catches the woodpecker's attention. We mark our trees on this forest, and the National Forest does it as well, using this. We use the green paint now. National Forest used to, now they use a white. But that just marks the tree. Whether the birds are using it or not, we still mark those trees so everybody can easily see them, know to be careful around this tree, and they each have an individual number. And this is a group of, it was an old woodpecker cluster on our other forest, and all those trees there had either gotten enlarged or died, and we're supposed to leave at least 4 usable cavities for each family group, each cluster. And this helps illustrate the cluster idea, because the cluster is the grouping of all the cavity trees plus plus a buffer on the outside of it, 100-foot buffer. I said 10, 100-foot buffer on the outside of it. And that's called the cluster area. It's no different than what's around it, except it's just got the grouping of cavity trees, and it's a little more limited on what we can do inside there. We can still do forest management, things like that, but it's still more protected during nesting season. We're limited during nesting season. Every morning when they get up, every bird in the family gets out of their roost, and they'll peck at their resin wells to make them fresh sap every day. Then they all congregate at the male's cavity tree, which is usually the youngest, cleanest, best resin producing tree. They all congregate there. Then they go off on the forest together to go foraging. So that's what they're doing this time of year until it's nesting season, where they hang around here. And they're going to forage on pine trees a lot, but also even some hardwood trees. Like this one you can see has gotten a insect larvae out of there. This is actually one of the artificial cavity trees we put in, but it died. And so bark beetles and other secondary insects came in there and laid eggs. So it was a buffet for them to go and get all the grubs out. So they'll get insects, insect larvae, flake away the bark and find centipedes or scorpions or anything under that. A little bit of berries in their diet. And that's going to be their diet. They all do that together. Then just before dusk dark, they come back in and everybody goes back into their cavities. Pretty much, yeah. And they have a little communication. So if you hear one, they'll chip, 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 chip out here, you can kind of hear them. So they do kind of go off on the forest foraging. Yeah. And they're usually pretty much nearby. So if you hear one, you can usually hear the other one come up. They may not be right next to each other, but they're kind of within earshot of each other. Just like parents will say, don't get out of my sight, or don't get to where I can't call you back in. And this one is a picture. This was taken out here by a local photographer. And that is one of the nestlings that is in there. It's probably just about to fledge, because if it can reach up that high with the adults coming back and forth to feed it, then it's probably about to fledge. When they lay the eggs, yes, ma'am. Yeah. In fact, the whole family, if they have a helper bird there, they all help to feed it. So they go off and feed themselves, but they come back and forth just about every 15 minutes. That's why it's the best time to see them is during when they have little ones or eggs in the nest, and come back and forth and feed them. And of course, the young are there for 26 days after the eggs hatch. For me to monitor and to band the birds and to see who's nesting and who is nesting successfully, I've got a tool here, and you'll see that as well today. It's called the peeper scope, and it's basically it's already starts off as a surveyor's pole, and it's numbered off up to 50 feet, and it's telescoping, and it's been adapted to do this type of work. On the top is a probe, and inside that probe are 2 lights and a camera, and I can get that up into the cavity tree, and that on the right hand side you can see where I've done that. That probe's in the cavity tree, and when I turn on the lights and the camera, then I can look. There's a monitor down here on the ground with me, and I can look and see what's in there. So that helps me to know when it's nesting season, and I'll probably talk more about it out there about the timing of all this. But the female lays her eggs in the male's cavity tree, like I said, because it's the newest, best resin producing, probably the safest tree for that. She'll lay 1 egg a day until she's through laying eggs, and that may be 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 eggs. And after she's through laying eggs, then they start incubating the eggs, sitting on the eggs. So at night when Dad comes home, he's got to be there with the eggs, and he's incubating the eggs at that time. In the morning when he gets off and goes off foraging, another bird has to come in and take over. So they take turns sitting on and incubating the eggs. In 10 to 12 days, they hatch, and then the nestlings, everybody's going back and forth feeding the nestlings. After they're hatched, every night Dad comes home and he's got to sleep with the kids. So that's in there. And it may be, again, 1, 2, 3, 4 chicks in there. There's another view of the eggs. And this one, you not always, rarely does this happen, but it does happen once in a while. Usually when I go up to a tree and I'm going to peeper it to see if there's eggs in it, if there's somebody in the nest, they will flush out, but sometimes they stay in there. And here comes this black looking thing. I guess they think it looks like a snake. So it pretty upsets them pretty much. So I try to back out of there so they're not too stressed. But this is one shot where I was able to get an egg, and maybe 2. I think there may be another one behind it. An egg while the bird was in the nest. And they'll come out there and they'll peck at my camera and everything. But usually they'll flush out. And this is a classic photo taken by our beloved Debbie Layer many years ago. And I call it shift change. And this is where one bird is flying out of the nest and the other one is there. So I said, well, it's time to shift. Okay, I'll sit on the eggs and you go eat or something like that. So that's a pretty good classic shot. Here's one where they've started hatching. Oh, wow. And here's one hatched and some coming out. So when I see this, when I peeper this, and especially if I get at this point, that gives me a lot of information. And it tells me, okay, I know what day they hatched. If I'm going to come back to band them, I like to band them about day 7 or 8, but I can band them anywhere from 5 to 10. Around here, if I wait till they're 9 or 10 days old, their eyes are opening and harder to catch. If I do them at 5 days old, then it's harder to get the bands on those short legs. So I like day 7 or 8. And that gives me information. I don't have to come back till so-and-so day when they're 6 or 7 or 8 days old to come back to do the banding. This is another probably once in a lifetime shot, also by Debbie, of them taking the fecal sac out. They keep the nest clean. So when it's all hatched, or if there's an unhatched egg, eventually those are going to end up getting thrown out on the side of the tree. And here's the fecal sac. So their first little poops coming out in a little sac, and not all birds have this, but a lot of birds do, and have the little fecal sac that can just be tossed out and like a diaper genie or something. And again, everyone in the family is going to, they're going to feed themselves, but they're also going to come back and forth and feed the young. And this one has some kind of larvae right here. It's going to feed the others. And this is young one, probably about a 8-day-old chick in the nest there. This one is it's big enough to start peeking its head out. Can anybody tell what gender this one is? It's male. Very good. You see the red spot on top of its head. So it's first set of feathers, red spot on top of the head. And then after the molt has the red behind the head. Again, everyone in the family is going to take turns feeding them. So when I do band the little ones, not just to be mean, but this way we can keep track of the young, when they were hatched, where they were hatched. since we're part of the translocation cooperative, which I'll explain later, we're supposed to band our birds just to help identify them. And so if I'm going to band them, then I know how old they are when I get there, either by determining their age back when I saw them hatching or by peeping again before they were done. I didn't bring it in, but I'll show you out in the field. I've got it's rubber surgical tubing, and I've got 3 little loops on it from 50-pound test fishing line, and it's got little nooses on it. And I go up to the tree, and what I do is I go up to the tree, and of course my hand can't get in here. And don't want to use grabbers, grab little ones. When I go up there and I have that noose with me, I climb up there and I put my hand over the hole. These baby's eyes are closed, but even her fire eyes are closed, and it's light. You can tell something's there. So what do you think the little babies do? If I come up here, there's a shadow right there. Yeah. They do what baby birds do. Their eyes aren't open, but they don't know the difference. And they think mom or dad or brother's there to feed them, so they stick their heads up and just like chirp, chirp, chirp. That's what I want. So I lower my noose down, and then I pull back on the end, and it shortens the nooses, and I capture them. So, but carefully, I go carefully. Sometimes I catch a wing, but usually it's the head. I've even captured 3 before at once. That was early on in my career. So, I had to, which was cool. I got some bragging rights, but you got to be careful pulling them out because you don't want to hurt them. But yeah, you capture them. Once I'm done, once I have the birds, and you can kind of see the tubing. And if you look closely in my hand that's closer to the tree, the left hand, you can see little bird legs sticking up.
How far are we now?
Depends on the tree. I don't remember where we took this one, but it's probably either 30, 40 feet high. They'll go up to 50. Most of them now are a little bit lower. We keep this habitat nice, good, and short, and so they don't build up as high. But when I first started out here, that wasn't true everywhere. There was a tree back here, old cluster 4, way back here. Everything was just really, really high. It didn't look the same as it does now. And so they built like 60 feet up, and so I had to climb 60 feet. It took me 2 days because I climbed up in my climbing belt, which you'll see a little bit later. It wouldn't go around. It was too big it was too small for the tree, too short, and I couldn't lengthen it. So, I'm going to have to borrow somebody else's belt, and which I did, but I also said, phew, I dodged it for 1 day. But I had to borrow this other belt and hook them together and then go up there. So I went up there 60 feet, pulling my ladders up, and after that day, I said, no more. And then this tree eventually died, and I said, yes. The woodpeckers had left, so it's okay. They left that area. And I've done 50. I've done a lot of 40s, and now mostly it's 30s. And thank goodness the contractors put in, if the habitat's good enough and the brush isn't really high, they'll put those artificial cavities in at 22 feet. That's 2 trees. I could stand on the back of my truck and do it. So.
You have to wash with special like non-sensitive soap or something.
No, I take off my gloves because it'd be too dangerous. They're sticky anyway, but I take off my gloves because I can't do much in gloves. But no, it's old wives' tale that, if you find a baby bird, mom won't come back because it's got your scent on it. That's not true. So the best thing is, if you can safely do it, put it back in the nest. These birds, once I finish with banding them and put them back in the tree, they've been squawking at me the whole time, but they come back, and when I have my ladders off, they go back and forth to feeding. So it doesn't matter. So it's just my scent. They're same with the fawn, same with baby rabbits. So it's best to leave them there or put them in the nest if you can, unless you know for sure, oh no, that mom just got hit on the highway or something like that. So I don't have to use these special soap. Now, one time avian flu was going around. They were kind of telling us to be careful, but it was never found in red cockaded woodpeckers, and nothing came of that. Each one, just like duck bands, the little aluminum bands, Fish and Wildlife Service bands, or actually now it's USGS bands, each have an individual number on them. And I have banding pliers. I put those around their legs. And then to help identify out in the field, because there's no way you're going to see the number on this band out in the field, even with the great binoculars, we have auxiliary bands, and they're basically little plastic colored ones that I put a color combination on each leg and can identify them that way. There's some little ones. After they're done banding, because I climbed down, I put them in a soft bag. I didn't even show that, but I put them in a soft bag and lower them down to the ground while I'm still up there. When I've captured all I can capture, and somebody keeps them in the shade and takes care of them until I can climb down. Then I go tailgate of the truck, or if I'm way out in the woods, down on the ground and put the bands on. Then I climb back up, pull the birds back up in the bag and plop them back in. So that's what I'm doing here, putting them back in. And that means thumbs up, that means success. This is also a good photo of the resin wells where you can see the sap flowing down. Again, you can see where the bark is brownish and fresh looking, where they've pecked on those really well instead of just the old dry gray bark. You'll see some old dry stuff here in a little bit. And again, here's a woodpecker at one of those artificial cavities. It's in flush with the tree. He can hang on the side, and it's protected from other woodpeckers enlarging that with the PVC pipe as well. However, there is still another predator. I guess you'd call it, it's not, some call it a parasite, but it's actually a predator. I guess you'd call it a predator that can get in there and crush and kill the eggs and the young as well. It's the flying squirrel. Of course, they are cavity dwellers as well, and they need a home. They're nocturnal. They do their thing at night, but during the day they need a place to stay. So, so flying squirrels will get in. They're a pretty big nemesis because they're going to get in there and they don't care about crushing and eating the eggs and eating the young and that sort of thing. They're neat animals. They're nice and soft and really cool animals, but they're detrimental to my woodpeckers. And sometimes you'll peek in there and you'll see some in a cavity tree, and there'll be several in there. And if it's a non-active cavity, if it's an old, enlarged, dead cavity, I just leave them be. They need a place too, so I just leave them be. But if they're in an active cavity, the woodpeckers aren't going to nest in there. And I've even got video footage that a Boy Scout took of the woodpeckers. Again, they're not real brave, I guess. They're going in there, and woodpecker went there kind of looking, and dodge back and come back, and then all of a sudden you see a photo of a flying squirrel going like that, trying to get them out. So they're going to leave. Okay, I can't do anything here, and they're not going to nest. So I get them out. The old-fashioned way was using some grabbers, like what a mechanic would use if he's working on an engine. Has a grab way down there, and other ways to get them out. But then I heard some Arkansas folks talking about a backpack vacuum cleaner. And yeah, that's right. And they use them like on airlines or something where it's a tight space and it's a backpack here, and they have a generator hook it up. I saw that Arkansas guys use them. I said, wow, because capture them the other way with my grabbers and ether and things like that. I had a 50-50 success rate, but these guys, they did really good. And I looked them up and they were like $500. I said, and this is way back. So, oh no. And they said, oh, just ask our associate director for the money. I said, I'm not going to ask Bill Oates for $500 for a vacuum cleaner. But Heartwood chapter at that time, they came through and they bought one. So it's like, all right. And so you have to have a generator out there. So I have to have someone with a 4-wheeler or something have a generator. So it's got a 50-foot long extension cord. But it's actually pretty nice. So I know that the flying squirrels are in there. I go up there and turn it on and stick my little hose down there as far as I can. It's really still kind of difficult, but you can stick it down there as far as I can. And ideally, I hear that. So I pull it out, and then I grab the squirrel and then turn off the suction because he's stuck on the side there. And I put him in the little cage there on the top left. I'll go again. So most of the time, that's what happens. The first time I was out here doing it, I was going to say, I'm going to come out here by myself. I won't tell anybody. I told the forester, I said, I'll be out here by myself, and I'm going to test it. So the first time I came out here, I said, oh, there's some birders out here. There's some naturalists want to see you. First Wildlife has someone out here. They want to see us. Oh my gosh. So I've been working on plastic bottles inside one of those. And so I went up there, and the first time, boom, success. All right, that's great. Everybody, yeah. And I already told everybody, I said, I won't do it if there's little ones in the nest. I won't do it. And there weren't little ones in the nest, but one of them just like turned just wrong, and I was there, had sucking. All of a sudden, I heard, and there's a video on YouTube of me doing it. And if you don't know, you don't know, but you'll see me go. I just kind of, oh no, and all these people watching. So I climbed out. There's no blades in there, so it's not like Vegematic or anything like that. But it sucks. I went down there, so I go down in there, and he's kind of stunned, but he's really ticked off. So it makes me have to climb down, make sure I capture him without him getting away, and put him in the cage. So that happens once in a while, but usually they get him on the side. And then I go. A lot of people that have hundreds of these things to do. I mean, they take care of them on the spot, but I can't do that. And I don't have to do that many, so I just take them to a nearby similar habitat. And don't tell Huntsville State Forest, but they've got a lot of our squirrels. And I put them right by a creek, so it was real nice. They can go tree to tree, so it was nice. Here's a rat snake. I mean, it was a faked photo. Even though it's real, the snake is really on there, but it was a photo that a pine snake they had in captivity, and the biologist stuck it on the tree to get a picture of it. But that's actually what they do. They'll climb up there. So the flying squirrels, the rat snakes are major predator. Southern pine beetles, again, the ones that can kill all those trees, they're detrimental to these trees. You know, with the pecking that they do on these trees, that sap, that pine smell comes out in the air, and that's what these beetles hone in on. They come in there, oh, a damaged tree, and they come in there to it. And so southern pine beetles can be a problem to them. The Ips and graver beetles, these are the little pitch tubes that they put out because they go in and cast sawdust out with them as well. So these are one of the Ips and graver beetles, which can also kill the trees. High winds, of course. This was back in 1998 when we had some, it never said a tornado, but they had straight line winds, and it came even where I'm in Lufkin, they blew down trees. This is on the Sabine National Forest. They're on the near the border with Louisiana, and it took out a lot of these woodpecker trees. There you see the green paint there. But these artificial cavities, by that time, the artificial cavities were in use quite a bit. And so everybody banded together that put in artificial cavities. And after all this right here, they were putting in artificial cavities so the woodpeckers would have something to come back to. And one guy said, I was done for the day. It was starting to get dark. So I came down, put my chainsaw in the back of my truck, and I just put one of these artificial cavities in, and here comes a woodpecker and went right in it. So that is a good management tool for storm damaged trees. You know, they can't roost out in the open for a year or two or three, so they're going to get eaten. So this is a good management tool to where they have extra trees to go to in case of something like this. Also, if we want to bring in unrelated birds and enhance a population and make it larger in new places, put in 4 of those artificial cavities and move a pair of birds in there or something like that. So it helped their population numbers start tipping back up. You'll notice in 1990, they'll start pitching back up a little bit. And this is here on this forest. Again, it shows even where we put the artificial cavities in, there's the weakness in the tree. So when this is one of the, either Rita or Ike. Oh, I said Ike right here. Okay. So in September 2008, Hurricane Ike came through, and of course we got leftover winds from that, and it snapped right off there. Unfortunately, we had artificial cavities that we could replace this one with. Okay, again, so keeping the habitat like this, the nice open park-like area, you still want vegetation on the ground, but you don't want the mid-story to get up over 7 feet high. The pine, it's not too dense, even with pine trees. That's what they like, but to keep it that way, we have to manage it. So here's Yopon thickets that you've probably seen in some areas. One way to do that is with our prescribed burning, and Connor was telling you about that and helping to keep the vegetation down. We can do that. Here, we're very limited on what, of course, conditions have to be just right when we do it anyway, and we have to do small tracks. So, but other places we can do it a little more than others. And you can see how, yeah, of course, the pine bark is doing its job, keeping the pine trees safe. And you'd be amazed at how quickly see it's got a lot of the stems burned there. Now, some of those are going to sprout back, but we can keep doing management practices as well. But you can see how quickly the green vegetation comes back really quickly. Around here, since we can't use as much prescribed fire, we do some of the mulching. And this is like a glorified brush hog that could come out there. You see the teeth down there that can get those stems down. It may not kill the vegetation, so we usually this ticks it off. It gets a lot done really quickly, but it ticks it off and it's going to come back more. So the next year or so, we sometimes have to follow up with prescribed burn or herbicide or whatever. So let's see if this works. I think if I do this. Let me get off. Okay. Anyway, that's a little movie, but it's just very short, so I guess it's not going to do it. But they'll go through, and here's a smaller version of that here, but you can see how it doesn't have to be golf course clean, and you want to leave some herbaceous ground cover down there, but it also opens it up to where the sunlight can hit and more wildlife friendly vegetation can come up pretty quickly. So this is a before picture here, before mulching and after mulching picture. So that helps a lot. Again, we sometimes have to follow up with a herbicide. right kinds of herbicides at the right time and prescribe burning. Another thing that helps the woodpecker habitat are Eagle Scout candidates. And they come in and they say, all right, man, a project working with an endangered species, which is with an endangered species, and Boy Scouts with hatchets and bow saws, look out. So I have a lot of them come up here. That project gets approved for their Eagle Scout project, and they get their crew together and they come out here and I assign them a place. And of course, they can't do the whole 125 acres or whatever each woodpecker is going to have, but they can do the immediate area around the cavity trees to keep that brush down. And so here's a before, during, and after photo of the scouts. And I say, take a 50-foot swath around each of the cavity trees, pull that brush off somewhere else where it can decompose, and don't pile it up next to another tree. So if a wildfire did come through, it wouldn't hurt that tree. And so I've had several of them do projects like that. Texas Master of Nature, Ursula, are you in here? Yeah. She helped us do this about 10 years ago, she said. Yeah, there you are. That's it, right?
And
So-
Richard's next to me.
Yeah. And Crean is next there, and then I'm in there. Yeah. So, and John Warner's on the far left. So we had, for our first time ever, we were part of a translocation cooperative. We were going to get to bring unrelated birds into our forest to help enhance our gene pool and beef up our population. And we just don't always have the budget or manpower to do some of this stuff on a large scale. So, and I think this is probably even before our mulchers. So Master of Nature was, bless her hearts, this was like July and August. I said, don't y'all work past noon. I gave them rules, don't do this. But they would take their hand tools and go in there and just start working in an area where we were going to put in artificial cavities to bring these birds into. And they did a tremendous job. So folks with a heart like that, see what they've done right here. So they would come out here and do that sort of thing. So when we're doing this type of work or any of the forest management that we do out here, saying it's for the woodpeckers, well, it's not just for them. It's good sound forest management anyway, and the prescribed burning and keeping the brush down and everything is good management practice anyway on any forest, but it's also good for a wide variety of other species, and some of them are kind of rare. So we have like the same type of habitat that these woodpeckers like. We don't have them here, but bobwhite quail would like it, and the Bachman sparrow, which is a rare bird, and probably the rarest snake in North America, the Louisiana pine snake, likes the same type of habitat if it's in sandy areas that have pocket gophers, and it's now been listed as threatened. And so they like the same type of habitat. Texas trailing phlox, which is a federally and state endangered plant. And in fact, it only occurs in 3 counties in the wild. I know at SFA Gardens, they have some there, but they're only known in Hardin, Polk, and Tyler counties here in East Texas. Those are the only places they occur naturally. Other places they've maybe been planted. Okay, so recovering for the woodpecker, whenever you have an endangered species, you always have a recovery plan for that, an actual written document on guidelines on how can we grow these birds, how can we increase them. And one tool that has helped immensely is the translocation. So all across the South, there's different states that come together in translocation cooperative. The cooperative we're part of includes Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And we meet once a year. And there's a couple forests that are designated as donor populations. They had extra birds, and each year they can, donate, yeah, basically it is. So donate birds to other populations to help their populations. We're a receiving population because we're very small and we're isolated here in this urban jungle. And so we're a recipient population. So we meet every year, and we're on a rotation, and we came up for the first time to receive birds. The different populations are on a rotation, and ours came up and said, how many pairs of birds can you take? Well, we said, well, we can get enough habitat ready for 2 pairs of birds. And so that's what we did. So we all get together, and the meeting's in August. We have to have our habitat ready by the meeting in August, because I have to show pictures and habitat and numbers of the pine trees and things like that. And then in October, usually about mid-October, is when we all get together and capture birds and bring them over. This first time was 2014. We did 14, 18, and 21. Yeah, so this first one was 2014. And when they captured the birds, let's see, that we got them from the Kisatchie National Forest in Louisiana. So we have some Cajun blood on our forest. And because the Sam Houston is the donor population in Texas, but at that time they were having staffing problems and monitoring problems. And so they were kind of out of the mix for that year. So we got them from Louisiana, and I met the guy on the Louisiana line because they couldn't travel into Texas. So I just met him on the Louisiana line and picked up my birds and brought them here. And one of the biggest days of my career life, my hand was broken, but somebody else, another biologist came, a contractor came and did it for me. How we capture them, and I just see by the timer on this, do I still have time? I've still got time. And I'll make this quick. Anyway, this is how we capture them at night. And we have aluminum poles, 6 or 8, some of them are 6 feet, some are 8 or 10 feet long, aluminum poles. And on the top of the poles, we stack them high enough to reach the cavity of the tree. On the top of the poles is a wire frame that has mist net on it. I think y'all are probably familiar with mist net, like catching other birds and bats. And we go up to the tree. We know which, we've been watching, we've been monitoring, we know which birds are going in which. And we're only going to take the juveniles, the ones that were hatched that year, because they do better if you move them off. And so we know which tree they go into. We give them a little time to settle down. And then we go up there and we plop that net over the tree, and somebody at the bottom is wailing away at the tree or scratching at it, make them think it's a predator or something coming up. Ideally, the bird flies out, gets caught in the mist net, and they're screaming bloody murder all through this. It's dark, so you hear it all over the forest. And they're pecking, they draw blood on your fingernails. Anyway, you get them out of the net and put them in a box. We identify them with their bands and where they were captured, and whether it's male or female. And then we find more birds and pair them up, unrelated birds. I brought them back to our forest, and this is Ross Carey who did it for me that year. And we climb up there. He's up in that tree at 3 in the morning. They had to come all the way from Louisiana, and they over there, they wait till they have all their birds, and then they partition them out to whoever's getting birds. And so I didn't get back here till about 2:30 or so. So he was up in the tree at 3 a.m. He climbs up in the tree. We already have an artificial cavity up there that we put in there, a new fresh one, and we put wire mesh over it. When he goes up there, takes off that wire mesh, plops in the bird, female in one tree, male in another tree. We cover them up with the wire mesh. Otherwise, they would just freak out and fly out on the forest and get eaten, and all the beef or not. So we just cover that up, tack in lightly with nails, have a string attached to it, and the string reaches down to the ground. The next morning, so we go get maybe 2 hours, maybe sleep, and come back. And just before daylight, we come back and I assign people different strings. And so we're holding onto the string from the ground. And when one of them starts pecking on the screen like they normally would when it's time to get up, then we all yank the strings off. If it's 2 birds we've translocated in there, we try to yank them off at the same time so the birds fly up, meet, hopefully fall in love, and stay there. Sometimes it works that way, and sometimes they shake around and just figure out what. Yes.
How long would you want?
No, I don't need a whole hour. Yeah, I don't need a whole hour. Yeah. And so, but that's how we get them on this forest. And sometimes they don't, and most times they don't stay together, but they do find maybe another breeding position somewhere else. So this is one of my young volunteers that came. In fact, it's the daughter of the guy who took all these pictures, wonderful pictures. And so he got a good series of them coming out. So in 2018, I was able to do it myself. These birds came from the Sam Houston, so it wasn't near so late, but it's still late. So I climbed up, put them in there, had volunteers on the ground taking data of which birds we put where. Again, have the screens and take them off. Didn't have as good of a, maybe a good photographer, but not as good of a camera, I guess. But you see it, you get the idea. So the current status, this is, this is up to 2021. The top one with the most woodpeckers here in the East Texas is the Sam Houston National Forest. And then the pinkish purplish one next down there is Davy Crockett. The yellow is Angelina, and then the black is a Sabine. So it's kind of in order of how many woodpeckers they have. So you can see them slowly start increasing, but especially the Sam Houston. Of course, they've got more of a population. They've got more acreage. And the genetic diversity is good there too. The others are slightly increasing or holding their own. Here on this forest, we're holding our own. Every 5 years, Fish and Wildlife Service goes through and does a review of several, pick several species, plants and animals and mollusks and things, and they'll go through and review, spend 5 years or more gathering data from the managers of these animals and looking at the best scientific data and see how the populations are doing to see how, do they still need to be listed or do they need to be upgraded or whatever. Well, this year, Red Cockaded, after reviewing all the information and us and other landowners that have woodpeckers on, said, we're just gonna do the same thing that we've always done, even if they were listed. So now the Red Cockaded woodpecker is proposed to be down listed to threatened. And you know, there's several different ways they could go. They could either say, leave it where it is, whether endangered or threatened, whatever, delist it, take it totally off the list like they did the bald eagle, or downlist it. And that's what they're proposing, and the final decision hadn't come out yet. And but they'll still be protected. It's just different types of protections. And they delisted gray wolf. There's still not a lot of them, but they delisted gray wolf because they're not here in Texas. So, so anyway, no matter what people think, they're not here. Where can you see them? You know where we are here. Angelina, Davy Crockett, Sabine, and Sam Houston all have populations of woodpeckers. Sam Houston's not too far from here on 1375. They used to have a viewing area that's a designated viewing area. And last I heard, there's still active woodpeckers there, but there's other places on that forest where they have them as well. Here we are, and you can see us where we are here. And we're just that upside down L-shaped patch of green within all the development. But we get it where our birds are very famous. They get a lot of attention from birders across the world, and horseback riders and hikers come in through this forest. And that last sign was just showing it's modern day. We have to prohibit people from using drones in the forest. So it's like that's an updated sign there. ID Fairchild State Forest is another one of our properties. It's the only other one that have the red cockaded woodpeckers on it. It's between Ruskin, Palestine, and Cherokee County, and it's part of the Prairies and Piney Woods Trail. So we have two family groups right there. They're very isolated from the natural forest themselves. There are some farmlands around. Oh yeah, there's a map, Mike. Okay, all right, good. We're hearing one right now. I heard one here and one maybe over this way. They are very curious. The ones on this forest are more used to people than in other places. And so they're used to horseback riders and people coming here all the time. So they're more likely to come in and investigate instead of stay away. So I think that's what they're doing now. I hope they did it for those birders back there that have been looking all morning. Yeah, so they're out off foraging. This is what we call the cluster area. You can see a green painted tree, some here. We're going to go into this stand right here behind you. The actual nest tree is down that way, but it's a little farther off the road, but you can see more trees with us being on this side right here. So this, again, cluster area, but they also have what's called foraging area where they go off looking for food. So yeah, they'll do that within this cluster area. We just designate this type of area because there's, again, during the nesting season, there's only certain things you can do within this nesting cluster. One of them is prescribed burning. That's one thing you can do while they're nesting, but most other things, using the heavy machinery and thinning the forest or mulching or anything like that, you can't do in here, but you can do it outside of the cluster area. So outside of the designated cluster area makes it 200 feet away from all the trees. You're far enough out there to hopefully not interfere with nesting season. And you, especially if you're birders already, if you do come here or any other place where birds are nesting any time of year, not to spend a whole lot of time here. So I'll say, if you're out here, the birds are nesting, don't spend more than 15 minutes here. You don't want to disturb that cycle of them either sitting on incubating the eggs or going back and forth and feeding the young. So you don't want to disturb that cycle there and make them a little more skittish, that sort of thing. So right now on this forest, they usually start laying eggs about middle of April. I can usually count on that, but it just depends on the weather. Sometimes things are a little bit later than that. And I think last year was one of those years where they were later, but we had later cold weather, sort of thing. Let's go over to where you can see some of the cabbage trees. Oh, before I do that, you can see in the back of my truck, I brought climbing ladders. That's what those ladders look like that I climb up on. You can see them closer later on if you want to. They're essentially 10-foot sections of aluminum ladders, pretty narrow, and they've got a bracket on one side of them that you lean up against the tree, and you can chain it to the tree and then attach more sections as you go up the tree. And that's how I climb the tree. I have a climbing harness on with a belt that goes around like you saw in the photos. And with me standing on the rungs of the ladder, but also having that harness with the belt around the tree, when I'm standing and I lean back, my weight helps keep that belt tight against the tree. So I've got two hands free to do whatever I want to, the capturing the birds, or if I was putting in artificial cavities, that sort of thing. And you saw that in the picture, the photo of the guy putting in artificial cavities. So that's how I get up and down there. This is the noose. Again, this is Fish and Wildlife Service approved. I have to have permits to do all this, even just monitoring the birds. I have to have federal permit and state permit and a banding permit to do all this. So this is approved by Fish and Wildlife Service, just rubber surgical tubing. And with my fishing line, I've got the nooses here. This is what I funnel down into the nest. When I feel like I hit bottom, then I pull back here, capture the little ones in that little noose right there. So that's simple. And then my banding kit. Oh yeah, you got it. You can keep it open. I'm just you keep it on your neck. I've got the basic. I had to buy banding pliers, which I don't know if you've all been involved with banding or not, but they're pricey because they're made for this. But Lowe's doesn't carry them. And so I've basically there's a little peg on one side of them, and the bands that I have are aluminum, but there's a slit on one side, but they're round. And I basically put that band on here. And when I open this up, that little peg on top opens up and widens that band up. So it's wide enough for me to put on their leg. Once that aluminum band is open wide enough, and I put it, whichever one of these holes fits it best. Of course, these little tiny woodpecker ones go in the top. And I put the aluminum band there, and I peckers, their toes 2 points forwards and 2 points backwards. And why would that be? Yeah, so you're on the tree, side of the tree. You spend a lot of time there or on the limbs, and those 2 toes there and 2 toes here. So I got to be real careful, make sure all the toes are pointed forward, lay that little leg inside the band here, and then start pinching them together until they come together. And then I take the auxiliary bands. Let's see. I've got another tool to put those on, and they are, I've had this lid for about 20 years and I broke it the other day. So here's what the little tiny metal bands, each has an individual number. I'm always very careful with those. There's woodpeckers again, but I have to account for every one of these. So every year I have to show them what numbers I've used and how I banded the birds. And I make sure I don't drop these anywhere because I still have to account for them. If they're not on a bird, I have to explain to them, well, I lost them out in the woods or something. The auxiliary bands are these little plastic ones. Right now I have them on, I get different colors, and I have them all together on different little holders because I've already come up with my color combinations for this year that I'm going to put on one of the legs. So this is the spoon that I use. It's called a spoon. And how I do that is, and the spoon, I will put 1 or 2 of the bands on, and I slide it on this, and this is what opens that little plastic band opens it up. Then I lay the woodpecker again, pointing the toes forward, lay the woodpecker's leg in here, and then pull this back and pinch it, hold it together, and they're banded for life. Their legs don't get much wider. They may get a little bit longer, but for the most part, they don't get wider. So they're banded like this for life. And I'm banding them at like 8 days old, something like that. So that's how they are banded, and how we can find out which bird is which out in the field. Okay, so let's put this up. I think that's all I got. And that won't zip up very well anymore. It'll just do that. So you can put it back in the truck now. Thanks. Oh, and this too. Thanks, Jane.
You're welcome.
There you go. Okay, so we're gonna go look at some trees and do some comparisons, and I'll use the peeper scope to get into one. And I'll carry this now. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Yeah. I better just smile. Whoa. Right now we have berries coming on. It's already running, so they're coming. So as we walk, just pick your feet up pretty well because there's gonna be vines out here, and of course maybe some little roots and other plants and things like that. But it's kept nice and open. This is what they like, a nice, clean, easy flyway. There's still vegetation down here, herbaceous vegetation that's going to let the insects rear their young, and those insects are going to climb up on the trees, and that's part of their food, that's part of the food chain for them. It's going to have berries and other things for the woodpeckers, but also for other wildlife. So this is a nice stand that we can, this is one that we can kind of burn, or at least in the past we've been able to burn it more often in small tracks, but sometimes we have to do other mechanics and things like that, Boy Scouts or whatever, like you saw in the videos there. So let's be careful walking through here, but of course the blueberry's going to have thorns on them. Right here, you can see that this one is one of those artificial inserts, because I can still kind of see the rectangle. Sometimes it's hard to see as a tree starts sealing up around them, but it's one of those artificial cavities there. But you see it's gray looking, and maybe a little sparkle once in a while, but it's pretty, the sap on it, they've used it in the past. So that's how I know they've used it in the past, because of the sap, but it's gray. You don't see the reddish little wells inside the wells there. So it tells me this is an inactive tree. We still keep it here. It's an old historical tree. They may go back to it, but this is so old it's probably not as nice inside as some of the newer ones. But it is inactive. The woodpeckers are not using that one. Now, there's kind of shade on these right now. The position of the sun isn't allowing a good view of them. But this one over on the left, it may be a little bit of activity. During the winter time, the sap isn't flowing up through the trees as well. Now if it's springtime, that sap flow is going to increase, and it'll be easier to tell. But this one on the right, cavity tree on the right, it looks like an active tree, because you can see some old dried stuff there, but you can see some fresh stuff, like they were working on it today. And that one looks more active now. As the spring goes on, probably pretty soon it'll be easier, a bit more than that, to tell that. I'm just looking at the tree. It looks like a strange shadow, or like a limb in a shadow, but it looked like a snake at first. I said, wow, that'd be cool if y'all got to see that, but it's just a shadow on the limb. And this one over here, maybe a little bit of activity, but I think it's mostly inactive. And this one is lower and easier to do. So I am going to peeper this one. There is one down there, and that's the nest tree, and I can peeper it. And I have to have people tell me, give me directions up, down, left, or right. So I can't always see. That one takes a while, and it's farther to walk down to. But this one is going to be easier. And if it's inactive, we're more likely to maybe see squirrels. So I'm going to come up to it. I might can see that hole, I might not, but if I can't see it, I'll tell you, y'all give me directions. Go up an inch, left an inch, or whatever. This is pretty short, so it's not bad, but the taller this pole gets, the skinnier it is, and more like a circus pole doing this. So every little move I make is exaggerated. And so it's harder to do the tall ones. This one may not be so bad. And, I was expecting wind today, but this is bad. It's been a few years since the Boy Scouts did this one. Spring it or something. And that's pretty much under the hole.
Yeah.
Okay. Can't quite see the hole. You can still hear the woodpeckers fussing at us. Okay, so guesstimate how high I need to go. Oh, really? Up, down, left, and right.
Up to the left.
If you want to come see, you can. It looks. I had need to shade it. Yeah, this is one that has a weird, now it has a weird configuration, and you can't always see the whole entire bottom of it. But it's empty. But I saw feathers in it. That tells me they're made feathers like from the belly. But a bird may be starting to use it. It's hard. It's really hard to see in the sunlight and with that because I can't get it all the way in. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of it. We're seeing now is the wall. Let me back it up so I can get it a little farther. And that's a little better. You still get some kind of wall, but in the very, very bottom, there's some wood chip. One way that I do a head count on these guys down here, since I'm hour and 45 minutes away from the office down here, I don't come down here early as and many times as I do on at the other forest. But one way to take a head count is to come out and do early morning roost check. And that entails coming out before they come off the roost, knowing about which tree is the male's cavity tree, and just come out here and sit and wait. They are, especially if it's cold, they're the last birds to get up. So I hear all the other birds before I hear them, but then they come out. And I get close to the male's cavity tree because that's where they're going to congregate. But sometimes the other birds' cavity trees are pretty close by, so I can keep an eye on 2 or 3 trees. But even if the other trees are a little distance away, I hang around the male's cavity tree because that's where they're going to congregate before they go off together foraging for food. So I just wait, and when they start coming out, they'll start, again, they're vocal birds, so they'll start chip, chip. They may or may not see me. And but either way, they're going to start pecking their resin wells, and they'll talk to each other, and I can kind of get a head count, and they all kind of come close to the male's cavity tree. But to make sure, I wait and watch, get a patch of blue sky, hopefully between me and them, and I get to see them flip off. They do a little bit of the dipping thing as they fly off, and can count the number of birds that way. Well, that's because I have to make a report later on, and this is before nesting season, so we want to count their numbers before they nested, and that's one way to do it. If I just can't get there to do that, then I'll go by the number of active cavity trees. But that's not as accurate as actually coming out here and seeing the birds and watching them fly out.
What time do you come in?
Usually about 6:30 is about when they will come out. Depends on the time of year. And I always wait till after the time change, so I don't have to get out here like probably at 6:30 instead of 6 a.m. or something like that. Or they may be coming out closer to 7 nowadays, but that'll change really quick.
So changing the status from endangered to threatened, is that gonna affect the program?
We're gonna do the same thing we do here. It may or may not. Is everybody seeing what they wanted to? I'm gonna pull this out. Okay. He asked if they get downlisted to threatened, how is that going to affect them and getting funding and things like that? It could affect funding, but there are cost shares for even threatened species. There are protections, but this may be not as stringent as being endangered. And also in the forestry community, if a species is listed as threatened, then there is something called a 4D rule, a forestry rule, to where it gives us a little more leeway to do the forest management the way we do anyway, without harming the bird. So it just depends.
So it shouldn't be a problem.
So it shouldn't be a problem, especially on most of the managers, at least that I know in Texas, are still going to manage their property the same way anyway. Most of them are on the national forest, and they're mandated to recover the birds. So they have to go above and beyond even what we do. We still have to keep the birds going, but they even have to set aside more property for keeping the birds growing, so they will grow in numbers.
Okay.
But even as endangered or even as in threatened, we still can do forest management out here. Just inside this cluster area where their cavity trees are, we can't do any of the harvesting out here then, or spraying. We can do the burning, but we can't do that within this area right here. Do forest management. In fact, a lot of what we do is going to be good for them. If we have stands where there's even too many pine trees, you can still have too many pine trees for them, too dense. So we can still do forest management, and even inside the cluster areas, if we need to come take a few trees out, even though it's endangered, we just have to leave enough habitat for each one. We've got, of course, they don't know our boundary lines, and some of them we probably go fly over and do foraging, maybe at some of the houses, but probably they stay mostly away from that. But we can still do our forest management out here, and we've got our designated areas, make sure we have the right acreage and amount of what's called basal area density of the trees out here on 75, 100, I think these up here are maybe 100, 125 acres worth to get good quality habitat and keep it this way the best we can, especially in the cluster areas, but throughout is really good. So it doesn't stop someone from doing forest management, not even a landowner, private landowner. There's a program I can sign up, a private landowner who's worried about, I've got a lot of old mature pine trees. That's what these are.
I didn't know.
But I don't want.
Well,
And
they're with Donna at the red cockaded woodpeckers. That's what they're been listening to, and now
they
of course.
they can, if they sign up with it, they can still keep these trees growing to a large old age. And if they started with 0 woodpeckers, but some come over and take residence on their land, if they're signed up with this voluntary program, then they can give us 45 days in the non-breeding season to move those birds, and they can do what they want to. Otherwise, we have not program. The Endangered Species Act is implemented, and if the birds come over here, I just got to do.
Just don't have that camera in.
There's other incentive programs for them too. Some cost share, habitat enhancement for the birds.
She was not, we had to do everything.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments or things
Yes, totally, so they're out there.
in general for everything?
Yeah, so to spot the birds, when they forage, is there a certain, do they forage on the main trunk? Do they forage out on the edge? Do they forage on small branches, big branches?
I rarely see them very low, but sometimes I see them that low. And they do forage on the trunk of the tree and out on the limbs. And some people say, well, the males stay on the trunk of the tree and the females go on the limbs, or vice versa. But they can do either one. But they're available to have the whole trunk of the tree, usually about 20, 30 feet on up, all the way up to the top of the tree. So we'll utilize the limbs, the trunk of the tree. I rarely see them down low, but they do have some berry in their diet. So maybe some of the taller bushes they'll get in.
When do they start to them?
Yeah, the nesting season officially starts middle of March and goes through middle of July. But around here, they don't start actually laying eggs until middle of April. And they'll lay 1 clutch of eggs. And if they successfully fledge those young, they won't nest anymore that year. But if May or something else happens to that clutch of eggs, they may re-nest. But here in Texas, if they re-nest, and if it ends up being June, it's usually so hot those eggs will never hatch.
Right. That's why
The best time to see them is kind of late April, May, when the young are out.
Yeah, when they're feeding the young, coming back and forth feeding the young, or when they're sitting on the eggs, yes, but it's not as much activity as when they're feeding the young. So I usually don't start banding till the first week of May. So the very end of April to the first, second, and they kind of stagger sometimes. And mostly through most of May would probably be a good time. Again, don't spend a lot of time in this general area. Sometimes we block this off if there's a lot of traffic coming through, but some people have big old spotting scopes and telephoto lenses, they can see a long ways, but still don't spend a lot of time in one place. So it doesn't disrupt that incubation or feeding the young or something like that. That is the best time to see them. End of April and through May.
I was gonna say, well, you know how to sell.
There's another one,
I do.
for my part, if you keep going that way, then it's down in that area.
This would be hard to sew. Yes, exactly. I haven't tried washing it, but I just stuck them on yesterday.
And if you walk down, a little ways down there is a actual nest tree that used the last few years on the right hand side. It's getting kind of close to the house. But if you keep going farther, you'll pass a little road that crosses there, and eventually going down there, that closer to the list. Actually, if you take that,
this is made for fabric. I've never seen it made for fabric.
There's a cut road through that over on that side.
Trying to do fabric stuff, and you can't wash it. I mean, it's sticky back, it'll work, but you can't wash it.
That's where they're active.
Cold. I mean, I think if you
then you go down to the south side near the
yeah, because you wash and dry as if you really mild.
Then way down on the south side is another.
I guess I should wash it right. They would probably know. Yes. How do you?
Just guessing before nesting season, probably about 10
is not here.
Individuals, but 4 families, but 10 or 12 individuals. In just this area, probably, and I haven't looked at the active trees this year, but I would guess 5 or 6.
There's snacks. I've got some water and Mike here.
10 to 12 individual birds, because it's just 4 families. Yes, and we're like 1,700 acres.
I can't tell you.
Not all of it is some of it's younger.
I would read him. No, and I would love to try.
Not all of it's suitable.
I mean, it just seems, I wonder what.
But well, not all of it's
Yeah, I mean,
Most part.
yeah, or maybe, I don't know, or maybe
I
he
don't
just kind of
know.
wanted to because we were nice.
I thought he sounded amenable
They usually,
yesterday.
when we're looking at their foraging, she asked how large is the territory? It could go out from a quarter to a half mile out
Soften up a little bit.
from their trees.
Well,
We can set aside enough acreage for them to sustain each family.
well, you know what?
And
The,
that can be depending
sunset
on the
was
size. They have to have a certain size and amount of the
people are
10 to
saying,
12 inches or above.
so I need
And
some.
set aside if it's stocked really well.
So, and you can't even like
Still
drop
open.
people off and get out of there because
We
you
get
your
by
room
with
to back.
I
You're
think
not
we've got
parking space.
100 for one and 155 acres set aside.
They can open the gate. They can open the gate.
Our deadline, but that way we're showing that yes, according to the scientific research, we've set aside enough density of the large mature pine trees for this group family group. Same thing on the national forest, except they have to have at least 105 for each of their.
That's what I was thinking. I knew that was gonna be the big problem. Well,
He can also open the gate.
if he would open the gate,
I can tell you.
that would be totally well, don't you, there's not a cool down.
She asked about ideal population count. It just depends on what type of forested area you have. This is a small, again, 1,700 acres, which normally could probably handle about
No, it's
6 or 7 family groups. Could handle this maybe safely if it was all in the good shape. The national forests, of course, have more. The Sam Houston, which is up here, close to the Waverly area, that's going to have the most out here. Trying to think of everybody's latest population counts, but they probably have
So the horse dealers go in there.
250 family
You
groups.
mean, okay, the one.
There's
that
the
has-
family groups and individuals, I couldn't tell you. The other, Angelina probably has 100 and something,
There's a
135.
parking lot,
The
and then
mean,
there's
and
the
they
gate
probably
that goes
probably
across the
have
road. It goes across the bridge. and People just walk, people walk to the sides of it, to get in, walking.
Potentially, now if we move the birds in from Louisiana,
That's where they go.
or if they stayed where they were, we could have that many.
When you and I
families.
parked up
They
People's
didn't
Road,
say where they were, and
Yeah.
they've individually found
Hi.
the population. So unless, and you know, a female from here, an extra female isn't going to stay usually behind as a helper bird. She'll go off and find her own place, find an unmated mate, a male somewhere, or start a population somewhere else. And we haven't seen that happen too much here yet. I don't know where they go, well, we've had one Louisiana bird's the first time has been the breeder bird here for a long time, but I don't think she's still alive. But so they'll find a place. I don't expect to have 5 yet. If that one group had stuck, that would be great. We would have 5, but so far that's not happening. So unless another bird dares to come across all of this urbanization and come here from the Sam Houston and find an unmated female, and they find our extra clusters that have those artificial inserts in there, yeah, that would work. Yeah. But you know, it's always good to have any type of wildlife, good travel corridors between one population and another, and we just don't have that down here.
So what was the population 10 years ago?
10 years ago here, we used to have, we've had 4 for a long time, and maybe 20 years ago, we had like 6 or 7. Now in our old records, you'll see more listed. Like we've got like 12 different clusters out here where they've had before. And the guy who was doing it back then, he would say, if they were all active, he would say 11 or 12 family groups. Well, the more that we learn now, that they probably weren't all individual family groups, because that really would have been, I mean, territory would have been a big problem because some of them were close by. They were probably 2 actual clusters where it's called a captured cluster, where most of the family group is here, but 1 or 2 set up housing and that one nearby, and it's actually 1 family group, but they're using 2 clusters. So that happens sometimes, and I saw that happening here too. So it's hard for me to believe that on this forest we actually had that many family groups all at once. And he just didn't know. And the more we learn about the birds, the more we find out that sometimes 1 family group will actually be using 2 clusters.
What's the survival rate on?
Survival rate on the clutch, often I will see, most of the time 3 eggs or 4 eggs. Sometimes all 4 eggs hatch. I more likely see 3 of them hatch, and then the young survive that unless a snake or predator comes in. But usually whenever I've got young, a clutch of 2 or 3 where they had 3 or 4 eggs and 1 egg not hatched, I would see that many fledged. 2 hatch out of, and fledge out of 3 eggs and 3 out of 4. On really good years, they all survive. I've had 4 out of 4 survive, 3 out of 3 a lot. And on extra, I think somebody's going to do a study about this, and I think it needs to be done. When we have a lot of rain, a lot of rainfall during our nesting season, I tend to have a lower success rate. And that's probably because the adults just can't go out foraging for food or bring them in the food. So sometimes I think that is a factor. Sometimes you have factors like that. What do they forage? Insect larvae, they'll flake away the bark of the trees and find little ants or scorpions or centipedes or something up under the bark of this. If there's a dead tree, whether it's pine or oak, they'll go through and find insect larvae there. And a little bit of berry is in their diet. Again, there may be some bigger things here like beautyberry or something like that, or yopon that they can get to. A little bit of berry, but probably most of it, majority of it is going to be insects or centipedes or scorpions or larvae.
Okay, we're close to our time limit. Any last questions? Guess we can start walking back.
I hope to see y'all at some other point here on the forest, because most of y'all are usually doing something here on the forest in some form or fashion. And so I'll probably run into you again sometime. Thank you. Thank y'all. Thank you, Zoomers, if you're still there.